2 Jedi ended the bloodiest war the Republic had ever seen. Then they vanished. Their names were Revan and Malak, and for a time, they were legends. But even legends leave shadows behind. The Mandalorian Wars had torn across the galaxy like wildfire. Entire systems burned. The Cathar were driven to extinction. Worlds like Sirocco were reduced to ash. And still, the Jedi did nothing. The Republic pleaded, the Outer Rim bled, and the High Council remained silent. They feared another Exar Kun, another fall, another Jedi turned Sith. But not everyone obeyed. Revan and Malak, Knights of the Order, defied the Council. They rallied thousands of Jedi to their side and took the war into their own hands. They became generals, tacticians, saviors. To many, they were the only reason the Republic still stood. And then, without warning, they were gone. The final battle had shattered Malachor 5. The mass shadow generator tore the planet apart, leaving behind a graveyard of broken ships and dead soldiers. In that moment, Revan disappeared. So did Malak, and the fleet they commanded, the largest Jedi-led force in history, simply vanished into the void. The war was over, but there was no peace. The Jedi returned to their temples, their robes clean, their voices calm. They told the galaxy to heal, to forget. But the veterans could not forget. They had seen the cost, they had heard the screams. They had followed Revan into fire and returned alone. The Force felt quiet, but not in the way peace feels. It was the quiet of something watching, something waiting. Then the rumors began. Republic patrols lost near the unknown regions. Unfamiliar ships glimpsed on the edges of star charts. Traders whispered of fleets that bore no Republic insignia and no Mandalorian markings. They flew under a different symbol, something no one had seen in generations. The red crest of the Sith. But the Council did not believe it. Or perhaps, they simply refused to. They spoke of healing, of scars that needed time. But deep within the Force, the scar was still open, and it was beginning to bleed. The unknown regions were never silent. They whispered in ways the galaxy had forgotten how to hear. Long-range sensors failed. Ships veered off course. Patrols vanished, and no one could explain why. But the rumors kept growing. Freighters passing through the Hydian Way reported strange readings near uncharted systems. Smugglers spoke of ships that drifted into dark space only to return without crews. Some captains claimed they'd seen entire fleets hiding in the void, silent and waiting, always watching, never attacking. The Republic dismissed it, called them ghost stories. Survivors of war trying to make sense of nightmares. But the Jedi, they knew better. A darkness had begun to move beyond the Outer Rim. It had no name, no leader, and no voice. But it left ripples. In the Force. In the minds of those who once followed Revan. Jedi who had returned from the war began to change. Some grew cold, some heard whispers. Others simply left. Without explanation. The Council remained still. Their silence had become familiar. But to Jedi like Bastila Shan, it was more than silence. It was blindness. She had once shared a battle meditation bond with Revan, one that went beyond words, beyond space. She could still feel echoes of his presence, like footsteps on the edge of memory. He was alive, but something inside him had changed. And he wasn't alone. On distant worlds like Taris, Dantooine, and Onderon, strange sightings began to spread. Locals spoke of Jedi-like warriors with red sabers, wearing black robes that bore no family crest. They did not speak, they did not kill, they only watched. Some thought they were Sith, others believed they were spies. But those who saw them all agreed on one thing. They were looking for something, or someone. The whispers spread into the military ranks. Former officers who were integral had served under Revan began to disappear. Some resigned, others simply left their posts without a word. A few formed strange convoys and headed for deep space, as if following an invisible command. The Jedi called it a sickness of the soul. But in the outer territories they gave it another name, Revan's Call. Some said it was a vision, others said it was madness. But whatever it was growing louder. In every shadowed corner of the galaxy, the same rumor spread that Revan had returned. But he was not the man they remembered. He no longer wore the robes of the Jedi. He no longer fought for the Republic. And the one who now stood at his side was Malak, changed, scarred, silent. They were gathering power in secret, building something vast, not an army, an empire. The war had ended, but peace never came. It lingered in the air, false, fragile, waiting to break. Across the galaxy, the Force began to feel, show, wrong. Not loud, not violent, but hollow like a note held too long, fading into silence. The Jedi who returned from Malachor felt it first. The planet had changed them. The sound of collapsing ships, the weight of 1 billion souls erased in an instant. It had carved something into them. They tried to meditate, but the quiet hurt. The Force no longer answered the same way it once did. Some called it exhaustion, others called it shame. But the truth was darker. The shadow that had touched Revan and Malak at the edge of the unknown regions was beginning to reach into the hearts of others. Not with words, not with temptation, but with hunger. The kind that fed on purpose and left only obedience. The Council did not see it. They believed the dark side had died with Exar Kun. They told the survivors to rest, to release attachment, to find serenity. But serenity cannot mend a wound that has not healed. On Dantooine, Bastila Shan felt it strongest. The Force around her shivered when she meditated. Sometimes she would hear a whisper, faint, distant, like a storm beyond the stars. Not a voice, a presence. And she knew who it belonged to, Revan. She could not explain how she knew. The bond they once shared during the war had been severed, yet part of him still echoed through her mind, a memory that refused to fade. He was alive, but he was no longer the same man who had led the charge against the Mandalorians. In the archives, old masters began to search for answers. They found fragment Sith artifacts resurfacing in black markets, cults praying to names long forgotten, and reports of crimson lightsabers seen in shadowed worlds. Every clue pointed to one truth: the Sith had returned. But no one knew from where. The High Council dismissed it all as superstition, a fear born from too much war. They believed the Sith extinct, buried with Korriban's dust. Yet in their denial, they ignored the warning the Force had been whispering. Something had awakened beyond the rim. Something ancient, something patient. And the Jedi who had followed Revan were hearing it too. They felt a pull in their dreams, a direction, a command. They tried to resist, but resistance only made the silence louder. And one by one, they began to disappear, leaving temples empty and masters sleepless. The Council said nothing. The Republic looked to them for guidance and found only quiet halls and unanswered questions. But Bastila understood what the silence meant. It was not peace, it was the calm before something terrible. It began as a flicker on the edge of the stars, a shadow, a formation, then a fleet. Republic scouts stumbled upon it near the edge of the outer rim just beyond Yavin, in dead space no one dared chart. Their distress signal barely reached Coruscant before it was cut off. No one believed it at first, but then the same fleet appeared again and again, always watching, never speaking. The Senate called for answers. The Jedi offered none. They sent masters to investigate, but Those who returned came back shaken, quiet, changed. What they saw was not just military strength. It was something else. A symbol, a red jagged star, painted across the hulls of warships, stamped into armor, sewn into black cloaks. It was not a Republic crest, not a Mandalorian sigil, not a known flag of any world. It was the mark of the Sith. The Jedi Council denied it. They argued the Sith were gone, that Korriban was silent, that no master had survived since Exar Kun. But those who had fought in the Mandalorian Wars, those who had followed Revan, knew the truth. This was not some distant, forgotten order rising from ancient tombs. This was new, refined, efficient, united, and led by someone who knew exactly where to strike. The core worlds trembled. Politicians demanded protection. The Republic began to mobilize what little remained of its military. And then, from hyperspace, came the first message. A transmission sent across known space. Calm, controlled, spoken by a voice few recognized. But Bastila did. So did Mitra Surik, and every Jedi who had ever stood beside him. It was Revan. He did not speak as a Jedi, not as a hero, not even as a warlord. He spoke as something colder. He spoke as a Sith. His message was clear. The Republic had failed. Its weakness had brought war. Its complacency had allowed suffering. And he had returned to bring order, to restore strength, to save the galaxy, whether it wanted saving or not. Behind him stood Malak, silent, tall, scarred by battle. But his eyes no longer questioned. They obeyed. What followed was not immediate invasion. Revan was patient, strategic. He began to take systems that were already broken. Mining colonies, trade hubs, warlord territories that had never truly recovered. And wherever his fleet arrived, the people surrendered without resistance. Because they remembered what Revan had done to the Mandalorians. Because they feared what would happen if they refused. The Republic could not respond fast enough. The Jedi argued. The Council hesitated. Some still believed Revan could be redeemed. Others weren't so sure. And while they debated, the Red Star spread system by system, world by world. The Jedi Civil War had not been declared, but it had already begun. The war was over, but Revan didn't rest. While the Republic tried to rebuild, while the Jedi argued behind stone walls, he kept moving. There were questions that hadn't been answered, wounds that hadn't closed. Why had the Mandalorians invaded when they did? Who had sent them? And what had they been running from in the first place? Revan didn't believe in coincidences. He followed the last traces of the Mandalorian fleet into the unknown regions. Malak followed him, still loyal, still uncertain. The stars grew cold. The maps became empty. The silence grew heavy. Then they found it. Not a fleet, not a weapon, a world, Dromund Kaas. And above it, the empire that no one knew had survived. The Sith had not been destroyed. Not truly, not completely. They had simply waited, hidden in the dark like coals beneath ash, waiting to burn again. At their center was a man, if he could still be called that, a being who had ruled in silence for over 1,000 years. He had no name, the Jedi remembered, but his followers called him the Emperor. Revan and Malak went before him as warriors. They left as slaves, not in chains, not with fear, with purpose. The Emperor did not torture them. He didn't need to. He spoke to them, fed them visions. He showed them a galaxy devoured by weakness, civilizations that drowned in freedom. He offered them power not to serve him, but to prepare the galaxy for what was coming, because the true Sith Empire would return one day. And when it did, the Republic would fall. Unless someone broke it first. Revan believed he was still choosing, that he still had control. But the Emperor had already planted the seed. He rewrote Revan's thoughts, bent his memories, shaped his intentions, not by erasing who he was, but by twisting what he believed. Revan didn't think he was betraying the galaxy. He thought he was saving it, and Malak followed. He saw the same visions, heard the same voice, but deep in his heart he wasn't sure. He trusted Revan more than he trusted himself. So when Revan took the Emperor's blessing and knelt, Malak knelt beside him, and the galaxy began to shift. They would return to the Republic, but not as heroes, not as Jedi. They would return as conquerors. Revan never screamed. Even when the Emperor entered his mind, even when the darkness peeled back everything he believed, even when truth was twisted into obedience, he remained silent, because part of him agreed. The Republic was broken, the Jedi were blind, and the Sith, for all their cruelty, had a plan. It started slowly. Thoughts became visions. Visions became beliefs. Revan wasn't forced to kneel. He chose to. Because what the Emperor offered wasn't just power, it was clarity. Order through control, peace through conquest, salvation through fear. Malak saw the change. At first, he believed it was part of the mission, that they were pretending, gathering intelligence. But the deeper they went into the Empire, the more distant Revan became. He stopped speaking like a Jedi, stopped thinking like one. And Malak, still bound by loyalty, followed. But the Emperor never wanted two. He wanted one voice, one shadow. Revan was the stronger of the two, more focused, more disciplined. And so the Emperor poured more of himself into Revan. His power, his will. Malak felt it. The way Revan gave commands. The way he no longer questioned. The way he spoke of the Jedi as traitors, and of the Republic as something that needed to be remade. Not saved. Remade. Malak tried to speak to him, tried to remind him of the Order, of the people they swore to protect. But Revan only said one thing. The Republic can't be protected until it's broken. And then, one night, it changed forever. They were brought before the Emperor, together, but only one would speak. Revan stepped forward. He didn't ask for permission. He gave his vow. He would destroy the Republic, not for the Sith, but for the future. Malak hesitated, just for a moment, and the Emperor saw it. But he allowed them both to leave. He had no need to choose between them, because he already knew they would destroy each other. Revan and Malak returned to known space, wearing masks. Not to hide, but to mark the death of who they once were. They had left as Jedi. They returned as Sith. But even then, they thought they were free. The Emperor had given them purpose. But he had also given them something else. A fracture. And it was growing deeper every day. Revan no longer walked like a Jedi. He moved with certainty, slow, precise, commanding. The mask he wore, once taken from a fallen Mandalorian warlord, became more than armor. It became his face, his name, his will, Darth Revan. He never spoke of the Jedi Order again. Not in sorrow, not in anger, only as a failed idea. The Jedi had taught compassion, patience, peace. But peace had nearly destroyed the galaxy, and so Revan taught something else. That mercy was weakness, that hesitation was betrayal, that unity must be forged even in blood. He and Malak returned not as servants of the true Sith Empire, but as its vanguard, its secret hand. Their plan was simple: break the Republic, crush the Jedi, and remake everything before the Emperor returned. Because Revan believed the Republic couldn't survive another war. not with the Sith Empire waiting in the shadows. So he would give the galaxy a choice it could not make for itself. A single ruler, a single path, a single will, his. He began by seizing forgotten shipyards, uniting lost Mandalorian clans. His fleet, once scattered, reformed in secret. He spared worlds that surrendered, burned those that resisted. But he didn't conquer for pleasure. He conquered with intention. He moved like a tactician, a surgeon, removing the corrupted, absorbing the useful. He left the Republic stunned, the Jedi divided, and the Outer Rim already lost. His followers grew. Former Jedi, disillusioned soldiers, refugees, scientists, smugglers. They didn't follow Revan because he was cruel. They followed him because he was right. And Malak followed too, but always behind, always second. Malak wore his own mask. He gave orders. He led fleets. But he could feel the gap widening between them. Revan had become more than a leader. He had become an idea. The Darth Revan who swept through the mid-rim was not a Sith in the way the galaxy remembered. He didn't build temples. He didn't preach ancient codes. He simply moved, and the galaxy moved with him. But even as he expanded his control, Revan never spoke of the Emperor. He never acknowledged who had shaped him, because he believed he had taken control of the vision, that the voice in his head had gone silent. But it hadn't. It was only waiting. Revan was not free. He was a weapon still being aimed. And though he could not feel it yet, the hand guiding him still held tight. The first worlds to fall didn't even fire back. When Revan's fleet emerged from hyperspace above Thorost, the planet surrendered within hours. No blood, no destruction, only silence and obedience. It was a pattern that would repeat. Planet after planet. Some bowed willingly, others resisted and were crushed. But all were told the same thing. Revan wasn't here to destroy the Republic. He was here to save it. And if that meant burning parts of it down, then so be it. He called it necessary, a purging fire. The Jedi called it heresy. But by the time they reacted, it was already too late. The Republic's outer defenses had been pierced. Trade routes were compromised. Entire sectors had switched allegiance not to the Sith, but to Revan himself. He became more than an enemy. He became a question. What if he was right? What if the only way to stop the true Sith was to become something worse? Malak, meanwhile, changed too. He grew more ruthless, less patient, more eager for destruction. He wanted to break the Jedi, wanted them to suffer, wanted to hear them beg. Revan didn't. He wanted them to understand. He offered surrender first, conversion second, and only then, destruction. But Malak believed mercy was weakness. He saw the lines Revan still wouldn't cross, and it enraged him, because Malak had crossed them already. And slowly, he began to resent what Revan had become. Not a warrior, not a conqueror, a teacher, a messiah. The divide between them deepened, and the Jedi Council finally realized their silence had created something they could no longer control. They had ignored Revan when he disobeyed, exiled the Jedi who followed him, dismissed his warnings, and now he was returning those lessons. In fire, they sent strike teams. They debated assassinations. They tried to divide his forces from within, but nothing worked. Because for all his power, Revan didn't fear death. He feared failure. He had seen what waited beyond the veil, what still slumbered in the far reaches of the galaxy. And he believed this war, this purge, was the only way to prepare the Republic for what was coming. He wasn't trying to conquer the galaxy. He was trying to save it, by ruling it, by reshaping it, by breaking it first. Malak had once been a leader. During the Mandalorian Wars, He stood shoulder to shoulder with Revan, not behind him, beside him. They had saved worlds together, liberated sectors, spoken in council chambers as brothers in arms. But now, things were different. Revan no longer shared plans. He gave orders. He no longer asked for thoughts, only results. And Malak, for all his strength, had become something else. Not a partner, not a brother, a weapon. He led fleets across the mid-rim, burning resistance before it could speak. His tactics were ruthless, efficient, but where Revan took cities with strategy and words, Malak took them with fire. And for a time, it worked. Worlds surrendered, resources flowed. The Sith war machine grew, but so did Malak's resentment, because the more they conquered, the more obvious it became. The people didn't fear Malak, they feared Revan, the masked figure who stood silent in command halls, the voice behind every victory, the mind behind every move. Malak was powerful, but Revan was necessary, and that truth ate at him. There were moments in battle, just seconds, where Malak wondered what would happen if Revan fell. What if the voice behind the mask went quiet? Would the Sith follow him then? Would the galaxy bow? He never said it aloud, never even admitted it to himself, but the thought lingered. Revan, meanwhile, barely noticed the shift. He was consumed by vision, driven by a future only he could see. He believed the war had purpose, that every conquest was a step toward salvation. He no longer explained his actions. He simply expected obedience, even from Malak, especially from Malak. And Malak obeyed, because he still believed in the mission, still believed in the Sith cause. But every time Revan made a choice without him, every time he was left behind to clean up what Revan had started, that belief cracked. It wasn't jealousy, not entirely. It was loss. He had lost his place beside the one man he had followed into war, lost the connection they once shared, lost the brotherhood that once made him feel whole. Now, he was just the blade, not the hand that held it, and he was growing tired of being swung. The war changed them both. Revan grew quieter, his words fewer, sharper, colder. He didn't see people anymore, only pieces. Fleets to move, planets to position, Jedi to sacrifice. Malak saw it happening. He saw how Revan's eyes never softened, how his voice carried no hesitation. There was purpose in everything he did, but there was no heart left in it. And still, Malak followed. He told himself it was loyalty, that Revan's vision was larger than his own. But each battle told him otherwise. Revan was not leading them toward peace. He was dragging them toward control. Malak began to disobey. Small things at first. He would attack when ordered to wait. He would bombard when Revan ordered restraint. He called it initiative. Revan called it failure. Their arguments no longer happened in private. The bridge crews could feel the tension. Commanders whispered. Sith apprentices avoided the halls when both men were present. Malak wanted to be heard. Revan wanted silence. It was a war within a war. On Taris, when Revan ordered the population spared, Malak overruled him and leveled entire districts. Revan's voice on the comm was calm, almost too calm. "Do not mistake destruction for victory," he said. Malak replied, "and do not mistake hesitation for strength." That was the first time Revan cut the transmission. The rift between them widened. To Revan, Malak was becoming reckless, a brute blinded by anger. To Malak, Revan had become a ghost too cold to see the blood he spilled. The apprentices began to take sides. Some followed Revan's discipline. Others admired Malak's fire. Revan didn't seem to care. His focus had turned inward, toward something unseen. His meditations grew longer, deeper. He spoke of a threat beyond all threats. of a darkness older than the Sith. Malak thought it was obsession, but deep down, a part of him feared Revan was right. And that fear made him angry. Angry that he couldn't see what Revan saw. Angry that he was always one step behind. Angry that Revan still spoke like a master and treated him like a student. He began to imagine a different future, one where he commanded the fleets, where his word carried the will of the Sith, where Revan's shadow no longer stood above him. It started as a thought, then a whisper, then a plan. He would wait, watch, and when the right moment came, he would take everything Revan had built and make it his own. The battle over the ancient world was not meant to be decisive. It was a trap, laid by the Jedi, sprung by the Republic. But Revan walked into it willingly. He had foreseen the encounter not as a mistake, but as an opportunity. A way to end the war with a single, final stroke. As the Republic fleet gathered above the planet, Revan moved his flagship forward, calm, unshaken, prepared. Malak, watching from the bridge of his own ship, saw the moment. Revan had isolated himself, surrounded by enemies, focused entirely on the Jedi strike team boarding his vessel. And in that moment, Malak made his choice. He gave no speech, no warning, no hesitation. He simply gave the order. All forward batteries fire on Revan's ship. His officers looked at him in silence, then obeyed. The turbolasers lit the void, a crimson blaze of betrayal. The blast tore through Revan's command ship, piercing shields, ripping through metal. For an instant, it looked like Revan had been erased. Malak watched the explosion without flinching. He told himself it was necessary, that Revan had grown weak, that the Sith needed a true leader, one who would not hesitate, who would not spare, who would not break. And now, that leader would be him. But fate had other plans. Inside the shattered vessel, the Jedi strike team had reached Revan just before the blast. Bastila Shan, guided by the Force, had confronted the Dark Lord face to face. And when the blast struck, it was she who caught him. Not with hands, but with the Force itself. She shielded him from death barely, pulled his broken body from the wreckage as the ship came apart, escaped with him into the chaos. Malak didn't know, not yet. He believed Revan was gone, vaporized, burned into memory, and with that belief, he claimed the title he had always craved. Darth Malak, Dark Lord of the Sith. His first order was absolute. There would be no mercy, no diplomacy, only destruction. He would finish the war the way it should have been fought from the beginning, with fear, with fire. But below, drifting in unconsciousness, Revan still breathed. His body shattered, his mind broken, his mask gone, and with it, everything he had been. The battlefield was silent. Where Revan's flagship once hovered, there was only debris shards of metal drifting through the void, faintly glowing from the heat of betrayal. Malak's fleet pulled back, leaving nothing behind but ruin. To the galaxy, Revan was dead. To the Sith, a new master had risen. Malak stood on the bridge, watching the last fragments of the ship disappear into the black. He didn't celebrate, didn't smile, didn't speak. For years he had lived in Revan's shadow. Now, there was no shadow left, only the throne, and the burden that came with it. He thought the weight would make him feel powerful. Instead, it made him feel hollow. He ruled through fear because he had nothing else. The Sith Empire, once disciplined under Revan's command, descended into chaos. Officers turned against each other. Fleets acted without coordination. The same control that once made Revan unstoppable was gone, replaced by Malak's rage. He demanded loyalty through terror. He destroyed entire worlds to make examples. And when people whispered Revan's name, he silenced them. But in the quiet corners of the galaxy, others whispered something else. That Revan still lived. The Jedi knew it first. Their strike team had recovered him from the wreckage, half dead, barely breathing. Bastila Shan had shielded him through the explosion, holding him together with the Force until rescue ships arrived. When they brought him back to Dantooine, the Council looked upon what remained of the man they once exiled. His memories were fractured, splintered between light and darkness. His mind was a labyrinth of broken truths. So they made a choice born of fear and hope. They wiped his memories clean, removed his name, erased his past. The Dark Lord of the Sith would be reborn as someone new. Not Revan, not the Savior, not the Destroyer, just a soldier of the Republic. They believed they could use him, that they could reshape him into a weapon against his own empire. But the Force does not forget. It only waits. And somewhere deep inside, beneath layers of healing and deception, something of the old Revan still breathed. His mask, recovered from the wreckage, lay untouched in the archives, blackened, cracked, lifeless. But to those who could feel the Force, it still carried an echo, not of hatred, not of power, but of purpose. Because the man who had once broken the galaxy had not vanished. He was merely sleeping, waiting to remember who he was. And when he did, the war that Malak thought he had won would begin again. He opened his eyes to a ceiling he didn't recognize. White lights, the hum of distant voices, the cold scent of sterilized air. He didn't know where he was, or who he was. His body ached in places that didn't make sense, as if it remembered things his mind no longer held. They called him a soldier, said he had been wounded in battle, said he was lucky to be alive. He believed them, because there was nothing else to believe. He was given a name not his own, a new identity, no past, only purpose, orders to follow, a war to win. Bastila Shan watched from a distance. She didn't speak much at first, just observed, measured. She knew the truth the others refused to say aloud. This was Revan, the Dark Lord of the Sith, or what was left of him. When she had pulled him from the wreckage of Malak's betrayal, he had been broken, more dead than alive. But something in the Force had told her not to let go. The Jedi Council agreed, but their decision was not mercy. It was strategy. They erased him, tore the memories from his mind, stripped away his name, his sins, his legacy, left behind only a shell, malleable, obedient, useful. The Council justified it as redemption, but it wasn't. It was control. They feared what he had been. They feared what he might still become. So they turned the greatest Sith of the age into a servant of the Republic, a tool, a gamble, one they could guide or destroy if necessary. And Revan didn't know, couldn't know. He lived on a warship now, served in uniform, followed Bastila's lead, as if she were a commanding officer. She taught him to listen to his instincts, to trust the Force. Even if he didn't understand it, he learned fast, too fast. Pilots noticed how he moved in battle, predicting enemy tactics before they happened. Commanders whispered how he read situations like a seasoned strategist. But no one questioned it. They needed victories, and he gave them. Still, at night, when the warship's corridors fell quiet, he would sit alone in the dark, staring at nothing, and wonder why the silence made him feel afraid. Something was missing. A shape he couldn't see, a name he couldn't reach. He dreamed of a mask he had never worn, of voices that spoke without words, of pain that came with no wound. Bastila sensed it. The Force still moved around him, not like a new initiate, but like a storm buried beneath still water. She was told to monitor him, but she had already begun to care, not for the Sith Lord he had been, but for the man who had no idea what he used to be. The one who followed orders, asked questions softly, protected his team without hesitation. He was not the Revan she had hunted, not yet. But sometimes, in the heat of battle, she would catch a look in his eyes and feel a chill. Not from fear, from recognition. The Force never truly forgets. It remembers everything, and one day it would remind him. He was never trained, not properly. But when the fighting started, he moved like someone who had lived in war his entire life. No one taught him how to disarm a bomb, or how to take control of a squad under fire, or how to speak to people with a calm voice that made them listen even when they wanted to run. But he did all those things, as if they were memories hidden in muscle. The Jedi Council watched from afar. They saw what Bastila reported, how he took command without hesitation, how his instincts made him more than a soldier. They told her to stay close, to keep him focused, to hide the truth, because the man they'd remade was proving more effective than they ever expected, and more dangerous. He didn't remember what the Force was, but it still listened to him. He could sense danger before it appeared, anticipate attacks, feel things others couldn't see. Bastila began to wonder if wiping his memory had removed the darkness or simply buried it deeper. He never asked about his past, not directly, but sometimes he'd pause in the middle of a briefing, stare at a star chart too long, touch a relic like it meant something, and then move on. Quietly, his new identity was loyal, efficient, but it wasn't empty. Something beneath the surface was awake, and it was watching. Republic officers admired him. They didn't know who he was. They just knew he got results. He was precise, clean, almost surgical in combat. Not cruel, but never merciful. When faced with surrender, he didn't hesitate. When given choices, he always picked the one with the least risk, even if it meant the most loss. Bastila began to question the Council's plan. Was this man truly new, or was he simply wearing a different mask? One battle blurred into the next. Worlds reclaimed, allies recruited. Revan, though no one called him that, moved like someone filling in blank pages he didn't know were missing. Each mission placed him closer to something familiar. A voice, a feeling, a name just out of reach. And when Bastila looked into his eyes, she stopped seeing a servant of the Jedi. She saw a question, one the Council didn't want answered. The man they had tried to erase was still there, and he was getting stronger, not through memories, through choices. And choice is where identity begins again. It started on Taris. The city world, still recovering from plague and occupation, was restless. Refugees clashed with patrols. Gangs ruled the lower levels. And beneath it all, something waited. He didn't know why he felt drawn to it. Didn't know why every corridor felt familiar. But as he moved through the underworld past broken signs, through scorched metal doors, the silence around him seemed to whisper. There had been something here. Something powerful, something buried. They found the first star map in the ruins, a device from an older galaxy, older than the Republic, older than memory. He stared at it for too long, didn't speak, just stood in the blue glow, as if trying to remember something he had never seen. When they left, Bastila felt it, a shift, a stirring. Not in him, in the Force around him. Like the past was reaching forward, they moved from system to system. Kashyyyk, Manaan, Tatooine. Each planet held another star map. Each star map brought a fragment. Not visions, not memories, instinct. He knew how to operate ancient machinery no one could explain. He recognized languages he didn't speak. He sensed threats before they arrived, and with each step, he became more precise. Not colder, not crueler, just more certain. He didn't question himself, didn't hesitate. He started to make decisions without Bastila's input, started to speak with a tone that wasn't uncertain anymore. She watched closely, said nothing, because part of her didn't want to stop it. The man she had known, the one broken, quiet, unsure, was gone, and in his place stood something stronger. Not the Sith Lord she had feared, not yet, but something between. He showed compassion when it counted, fought with precision, not rage. He wasn't the Revan who had burned the Outer Rim, and he wasn't the pawn the Jedi had rebuilt. He was becoming someone new. But Korriban would test whether that path would hold. The tomb world of the Sith, home to the dead and to the living who worshipped them. He didn't hesitate when they landed. He walked among the Sith acolytes like one of them. They didn't sense a threat, they sensed familiarity. The halls echoed with chants, with ancient hatred carved into stone. And for the first time, he listened. Not with fear, not with anger, with recognition. The Force didn't resist him here, it embraced him, and Bastila felt it, the old gravity pulling at him, the shadow of what he had been. But she said nothing, because she, too, could feel the truth. He wasn't being corrupted. He was remembering. Not through knowledge, through feeling, through reflection. Each place they visited had been a piece of him, and now they were his again. Korriban changed him. The tombs, the statues, the way the air trembled with echoes, none of it felt foreign. He didn't flinch at the sight of Sith acolytes, didn't question why they moved aside when he passed. They didn't recognize him, but the Force did. It pulsed around him differently here, not as guidance, but as memory. Each step into those shadowed halls awakened something he couldn't name. Not knowledge, not memory, something older, deeper. He stood before the tomb of Naga Sado, unmoved. Listened to the whispers in the stone. The darkness didn't pull him in. It welcomed him back. Bastila felt it too. She didn't speak, because in that moment, she was no longer sure who stood beside her. The man she had rescued, or the one she had once tried to kill. They returned to the ship with the final star map. The journey to the Star Forge was now complete, but so was something else. The mask the Jedi had placed on him, the one made of silence and false memory, had begun to crack. He asked questions he hadn't asked before, not about strategy, about himself. Why did the Sith fear his name? Why did the Jedi fear his survival? Why did Bastila always look at him like she was waiting for something to return? And the Force finally answered. It came in fragments, flashes, a battlefield, a blade, a betrayal, Malak's voice, a scream through the void, a moment where everything had ended and begun again. His knees hit the floor, not from pain, from clarity. He was not a soldier, not a servant, not a pawn. He was Revan, the Jedi's greatest mistake, the Sith's greatest threat, and the galaxy's last, unwanted hope. The memories didn't return all at once, but the weight of them did. He felt what he had done, felt the systems he had crushed, the Jedi he had broken, the people who had followed him willingly, blindly, and somewhere beneath it all, the reason he had done it. Not for conquest, not for pride, for fear. He had feared what waited in the unknown regions, and so he had tried to build an empire strong enough to stop it, tried to unite the galaxy in preparation, tried to become what the Republic needed whether it wanted it or not. Now, the Republic saw him as a hero. The Jedi hoped he would be their weapon. And Malak was still out there, burning what remained. The past had returned. But this time, he had a choice: to finish what he started, or to undo what he had become. The Force had waited for this moment, and now It remembered his name. The journey began with coordinates, not memories. He told himself this was just another mission, that the Star Forge, whatever it truly was, needed to be found, studied, and destroyed. But something deeper moved beneath each step. The places they visited were not random. They were pieces, fragments of a path he had already walked. Tatooine, Kashyyyk, Manaan. Each world held a star map. Each map hidden in places touched by the past, buried in ancient ruins, guarded by species older than the Republic. But it wasn't just history Revan was chasing. It was himself. On Tatooine, the endless desert stretched beneath a sky too large to hold onto. There, he found the map beneath the remains of a crashed starship buried in sand, wrapped in silence. And as he activated it, the force around him tightened. A pulse, recognition. The device lit up like it remembered him, not just as a presence, as a creator. He said nothing. But Bastila saw the way his fingers hesitated when they touched the symbols, as if something inside him already knew what they meant. Kashyyyk was different. The Wookiees whispered of shadows in the lower levels. Machines left by beings not born of their world. The star map there sat in the dark, nestled in roots, surrounded by wires no one had ever managed to understand. But Revan did. He didn't decode the system. He remembered it. Not fully, not clearly, but the way he moved, the way his voice quieted when the mechanism awoke. It wasn't discovery. It was return. The others noticed. Karth, the soldier who had once sworn to kill Revan, watched in silence. Mission, young but not blind, felt it in the way he stood too certain. And Bastila, bound to him through the Force, felt it strongest. Each world uncovered another star map, and each map lit up with the same truth. They knew him, not as a stranger, as their maker. He had touched them before. He had walked this path. And now he was walking it again. The Council had told Bastila that this was the Jedi's redemption, that Revan had been given a second chance, that he would become their tool, a means to stop the war he once began. But she no longer believed that, because this wasn't a second chance. It was a circle, and it was closing. On Manaan, he stood beneath the sea, inside a structure older than the Rakata themselves. He stared at the star map without speaking for a long time. Then he touched it, not gently, not cautiously, with certainty, and it opened. He didn't flinch, didn't react, but Bastila saw the moment in his eyes. He wasn't discovering who he was remembering. He tried to hide it, tried to stay focused on the mission. But the Force moved around him differently now. Not like a student, not like a servant, like a center. The companions who followed him no longer saw just a man. They saw something else, a presence that bent the air around it. A gravity that didn't ask for trust but pulled it. Some began to wonder, had Revan truly been destroyed? Or had the Council simply buried him beneath a mask and hoped he would never dig his way out? Revan said nothing. But when they left Manaan, his eyes didn't turn back, because in his mind, he had already been there once before. And the Star Forge was waiting. They weren't just coordinates. Not to him. The star maps pulsed with a strange presence, like they were alive, or trying to be. They reacted to Revan's touch in ways they didn't for anyone else. Not for Bastila, not for Jolee, not even for the Force sensitive. Only him. And every time he activated one, something inside him shifted. A memory not fully returned, but felt. The maps weren't machines. Not completely. They were impressions left behind by the Rakata, by their infinite empire, carved into the Force itself, meant to last, meant to guide, but also to judge. The Rakata had once ruled the stars with cruelty and precision. They had created the Star Forge, a weapon, a factory, a living extension of their hunger. And the maps were its veins. Revan had followed them once before, long ago when he first began his descent, before Malak, before the mask, before the war. And now, he followed them again as a man trying to remember why he ever did. When they landed on Dantooine, the star map hidden in the grove responded before they approached. Its glow stretched out to him, reaching through time. It didn't just activate, it recognized. Bastila stood behind him, watching, her hand near her lightsaber. Not from fear, but from knowing. Because each time a map responded to Revan, the veil over his mind thinned. The Jedi had believed they could remake him, a mind wiped clean, a body reborn. But the maps had not forgotten. The Force had not forgotten. And in these ancient places, untouched by time or control, truth waited patiently. The star maps didn't show him where to go. They reminded him of where he had been. His path wasn't forward. It was a circle, back to the forge, back to the place where he had fallen. And each activation was another step closer, not just to the destination, but to the man he used to be. In the jungles of Kashyyyk, the vines had overgrown the Rekatan chamber, but as Revan entered, they parted slightly. Not by his hands, by the Force. Even nature seemed to remember. The Wookiees outside called it cursed ground, said the wind didn't blow right there. They were right. The chamber was still, heavy. He placed his palm on the control panel, and for a moment, the map didn't respond. It stared back, as if waiting for him to admit something, to remember something. He didn't, he couldn't, but he felt. A long corridor, a voice whispering, Malak's laughter, a promise. And then, the map lit. The others asked no questions, but Bastila did. That night, she approached him alone. She didn't accuse, didn't warn. She simply asked, "Do you know who you are?" He looked at her, said nothing, and that silence, that long, steady silence, was enough. Because silence is what comes when truth is too heavy to name. She knew the council had lied, knew they had buried something that wasn't meant to stay buried. And now, as the last map came into reach, she knew that Revan wasn't becoming. He was returning. The star maps weren't leading them to the forge. They were leading him back to the moment everything had started. Because the forge wasn't just a place, it was a choice. And soon, he would have to make it again. It wasn't the maps that broke him. It was the places in between. The worlds he had once visited as Darth Revan were not the same now. The fear was gone. What remained was ruin. On Taris, the lower levels still hadn't recovered. Entire districts had been wiped out during Malak's bombardment, a strike Revan had once planned but never ordered. Now, walking through the ashes of those broken towers, he saw faces in the debris. Families who had once lived there, children who never had a chance. And though he didn't remember them, he felt responsible. Because even if he hadn't pressed the button, he had built the hand that did. The galaxy wasn't waiting to be saved. It was still recovering from what he had done to it. And the more he walked these paths, the more he saw his legacy not as strength, but as scars. On Manayan, the Republic's alliance with the Selkath had fractured. The memory of Sith scientists of experiments in the Kolto laboratories still haunted their cities. They spoke in whispers of the cloaked man who had once walked their halls. Not with rage, with calculation. He realized he hadn't ruled through terror. He had ruled through silence. He hadn't needed to speak. The consequences of disobedience had already spoken for him. Karth noticed the shift. The Republic officer had once hated Revan, but now he didn't know what to feel. This man, the one leading them now, wasn't a monster. He made hard choices, but he wasn't cruel. Still, he had built the monster, and Karth couldn't forget that. Neither could Revan. The Star Forge wasn't just a superweapon. It was a mirror, a place built from darkness, fueled by hatred. It had taken what Revan had believed was noble control, unity, strength, and turned it into endless war. He thought he had used it, but in truth, it had used him. He remembered flashes now, standing aboard it, looking out at the galaxy with a kind of emptiness that felt holy. He had believed he was saving the Republic by destroying it, and now he saw what that really meant. There was no pride in what he had built, only consequences. Jolee Bindo, the old Jedi who had joined them along the way, said little. But when Revan passed by, he muttered something under his breath. The past always catches up. It just moves slow when you try to run. Revan didn't respond, because he couldn't argue. The journey had started as a mission. Find the Forge, stop Malak. But now, with every new step, he was walking deeper into himself. And the person waiting at the end wasn't a hero, wasn't a Jedi, wasn't even a Sith. It was just a man who had made choices and was finally ready to face them. Not in anger, not in shame, in truth. And truth, he now understood, wasn't about memory. It was about acceptance. The galaxy didn't need him to be Revan again. It needed him to choose what Revan could never allow himself to become. Something new. But first, he had to go back. One last time. The stars above Rakata Prime were quiet. Too quiet. The planet had once been the heart of an empire that ruled through cruelty and control, an ancient world that whispered through time. And now, it was calling Revan home. He stood on the beach as the waves pulled back and forth like the breath of something ancient. And he remembered, this is where he had found the Star Forge, where the final piece of power had once revealed itself to him. The first time he had stood here, he had believed the Force was a weapon. That control was compassion. That destiny meant domination. Now, he felt something else. Not strength, not fear. Stillness. The jungle was overgrown. The old Rakatan tribes still roamed the wilds, whispering of gods fallen from the stars. They had no name for Revan, but when they looked into his eyes, they knelt. Because they had seen that face before. Bastila watched from a distance. She had felt his awakening, had watched the layers of Revan peel away not violently, but like dust swept by wind. The man beside her now was not the Sith Lord. Not entirely, and not the obedient soldier either. He was something else. Someone balanced between what he had been and what he could still become. The others, prepared for the final confrontation. Malak was waiting aboard the Star Forge, and they knew what he had become. Ruthless, unstable, drunk on the power Revan had once wielded with precision. But Revan wasn't focused on Malak. Not yet. He looked at the sky, toward the forge, and remembered what it was. Not just a factory, not just a relic. It was a reflection. It took from the Force, from pain, from conflict, and turned that into war. It fed on the worst parts of him, and in doing so, had given him exactly what he thought he needed. He had shaped it, and in return, it had shaped him. Now, he had to walk into it again, not to destroy it, but to face what it revealed. Because this wasn't just about Malak, or the Republic, or the Jedi. It was about choice. The Forge was built to remove it, to take one's will, one's fear, one's hunger, and make it into something unstoppable. But Revan had remembered something the Forge never could. He had remembered why he turned away from the light. And now, he remembered why he had to return to it. Not because he was told to, not because he was forgiven, because power without purpose meant nothing, and purpose without choice was still slavery. He stepped aboard the shuttle, Bastila beside him, the others silent, Not out of fear, but reverence. They didn't follow a commander anymore. They followed a man who had once tried to become a god, and now simply wanted to make things right. The sky turned red as they rose into orbit, and the Starforge came into view, black, burning, alive. It had waited for his return. But Revan wasn't here to be its master. Not this time. He was here to end what he began, and in doing so, to finally become free. The Starforge was not a machine. It was a wound. A place where the Force bent unnaturally, twisted by ancient power and endless pain. Revan had seen it before, not with clarity, but with weight. And now, as the shuttle passed through the Forge's massive entry gate, that weight returned. It didn't feel like entering a weapon. It felt like entering a part of himself that had never healed. The station was alive. Its corridors thrummed with dark energy. Sith soldiers, war droids, and twisted creations born from the Forge's core moved without rest. Each step forward was a step into Revan's past, into the path he had carved and abandoned. His companions followed him in silence. They had seen him change. He wasn't commanding them. He was leading them somewhere he hoped they would never have to go. Karth walked beside him, hand on blaster, eyes narrowed. Mission and Zalbar stayed close behind, tension thick in every movement. Even Jolee, weathered and wise, had grown quiet. And Bastila, once Revan's jailer, now something more, walked just behind him. She could feel the pull in the Force, but she trusted him. Even now, especially now. The Forge responded to Revan's presence. Doors opened, systems stirred. The walls hummed with recognition. It knew him. It remembered his voice, his choices, his command. He tried not to look at the bodies, not just the ones they fought through, but the ones already lying in the halls, soldiers who had collapsed from exhaustion, from the dark side's constant drain. The Forge didn't sustain life. It consumed it, and it had been doing so since the day he found it. He remembered that moment now, standing at the edge of Rakata Prime's ocean, staring into the sky as the Forge rose from orbit. It had called to him, and he had answered, not because he craved power, but because he feared what was coming, and believed this was the only way to stop it. Now, that same creation stood before him, endless in its size, sick with power, and at its heart was Malak. The apprentice who had once stood by his side, the man who had fired on his ship, the last remnant of what Revan had once believed strength could look like. Each level brought them closer. The battles grew harder, the noise louder. The Forge poured out more defenders, more droids, more dark-willed machines. But Revan didn't falter, because this wasn't just a battle. It was a reckoning. And reckoning does not allow pause. He moved through the Forge like a shadow returning to itself. Not with rage, not with hate, with clarity. Everything the Forge had created, every warship, every weapon, every soldier had come from his first choice, his first fear. And now, he was here to make another. Not to seize the Forge again, not to destroy Malak out of vengeance, but to stop the past from repeating. He reached the inner chamber. Malak's presence waited beyond the sealed blast doors, calm, heavy, familiar. The others prepared themselves, checked weapons, calmed breaths. But Revan did nothing, because this wasn't an ending. It was a return. Malak had always believed he was the stronger one, not in mind, but in will. Revan questioned. Revan hesitated. Revan forgave. And Malak hated him for it. Even when they were Jedi, that shadow had followed him, tall, silent, brilliant. Revan had drawn others in without effort. His voice calm, his gaze sharp, his presence heavy. And Malak, brash, loud, certain, had stood behind him. Always behind. Until the day he fired on Revan's ship. That day, He told himself it was necessary, that Revan had grown weak, that the Sith needed a leader without doubt. But now, deep inside the Starforge, as he stood surrounded by machines that listened only to him, Malak realized something that chilled him. Even now, he still wasn't free. The Forge obeyed him, but it didn't follow him. It responded to his commands, but it didn't respect his presence, because the Forge had been Revan's first. His design, his discovery. Malak had stolen it, but he had never earned it. And now Revan was coming back. He could feel it in the way the lights dimmed. The systems shifted, the Force bent. Not in fear, in memory. He had tried to bury Revan, erase him, replace him. But you cannot replace the architect with a copy of the frame. Malak gritted his teeth, stared out through the viewport into the heart of the station. He remembered the moment they had found the Forge. How Revan had understood it without speaking. How he had stood still for a long time, like listening to something Malak couldn't hear. That silence had always frightened him. Because it meant Revan knew things Malak didn't, felt things he couldn't. He had believed the dark side would close that distance, that raw power would be enough. But now, as the blast doors began to unlock, as Revan's presence approached like a storm in slow motion, Malak's hands trembled, not from fear, from anger, because somewhere deep in his heart, he knew this wouldn't be a duel. It would be a judgment, and he had already been found wanting. The door opened, and there he was. No mask, no throne, no army, just Revan, not the Sith Lord, not the servant of the Council, a man. And that, somehow, was more terrifying than anything Malak had imagined. Because this Revan wasn't here for vengeance. He wasn't here to prove anything. He was here to end it. Malak stepped forward, raised his lightsaber, and in a voice that echoed with defiance and grief, he said, "You should have stayed dead." Revan didn't respond, didn't ignite his blade. He just looked at him, not with hatred, not with pity, with understanding. And for Malak, that was the deepest wound of all. When their blades met, the sound was not rage. It was recognition. Red and blue light filled the chamber, flashing against the walls like lightning trapped inside a storm. Every strike was familiar, every parry predictable. They had fought beside each other too long to be strangers in battle. Malak attacked first, heavy and fast. Every swing a declaration of anger, every blow a demand for acknowledgement. Revan met him without effort. He didn't press, didn't taunt. He simply listened to the rhythm, to the fury, to the memory behind every motion. "Why didn't you kill me?" Malak shouted between strikes. Revan didn't answer. He couldn't. Because in that question lived all the years between them. The loyalty, the betrayal, the silence that followed. Malak pressed forward, his strength overwhelming. He had replaced doubt with power, compassion with cruelty. And still, it wasn't enough. The Force bent around them, clashing like two storms colliding in the same sky. Metal tore. Sparks fell like rain. The chamber trembled with every impact. But the fight wasn't just physical. It was memory. Malak saw flashes of who they had been, the Jedi Knights who defied the Council, who led armies across the stars. The friends who had once shared victory and vision. The moment Revan had chosen silence over explanation. He remembered the laughter before the wars, the trust that had once felt unbreakable, and now it all burned. Revan saw something else. The young man who had followed him without question. The apprentice who had believed every word, who had believed the galaxy could be saved by strength alone. The man who fired on his ship not out of ambition, but out of despair. They were bound by the same wound. The difference was that Revan had learned to live with it. Malak never had. He lunged forward, striking with fury, sparks lighting his face. "You were weak," he growled. Revan stepped aside. "You were afraid," he said quietly. The words landed deeper than any blade. Malak roared, unleashing a torrent of dark energy that hurled Revan across the chamber. Panels shattered, the floor cracked, but Revan rose. Slowly, calmly. He no longer fought to win. He fought to end. Their blades locked again, hissing, burning between their faces. Malak's mechanical jaw sparked as he strained to overpower him. "You think this redeems you?" he spat. Revan's eyes softened. "This isn't redemption," he whispered. "It's truth." Malak faltered for just a second. And that second was enough. Revan disarmed him, sending his saber clattering across the floor. But he didn't strike. He held his blade steady, its glow cutting through the dark like the memory of light. And he waited. Malak fell to one knee, breathing hard, his face half shadow, half machine. "Even now," he said bitterly, "you hesitate." Revan lowered his weapon. "Because I see what I made," he said. For the first time in years, Malak's anger cracked, and beneath it was sorrow. He laughed, low and broken. "You should have killed me on Malachor." Revan shook his head. "I did. You just never stopped dying." Malak stared at him, the man he had hated, the friend he had loved. Then, in a voice that trembled more than the forge itself, he asked, "Was it worth it?" Revan looked around them at the machines, the endless fire, the faces of the fallen, and said, quietly, "No." The silence that followed was heavier than the battle, because there was nothing left to fight for, only to end it. The Star Forge began to collapse, its systems overloaded. Its power, once drawn from the Force itself, turned inward, feeding on nothing. A dying machine, devouring its own soul. Revan stood over Malak's body, still and quiet, not victorious, not proud, just still. Malak had died with his eyes open, looking not at Revan, but past him, toward something he never reached, something he had never truly understood. They hadn't parted as enemies. Not in the end, because in those final moments there had been no need for hatred, only acknowledgement of what they were, of what they had become, of what had been lost. The forge trembled around them, metal groaned, flames erupted from broken vents, sirens wailed, but the loudest sound was the quiet in Revan's mind. The war was ending. Bastila appeared at his side. She had survived her own darkness barely, and in doing so, had helped Revan survive his. They didn't speak. They didn't need to. She placed a hand on his arm, not to pull him away, but to remind him it was over. The others were waiting. Karth, Jolee, Mission, Zalbar, the crew that had followed him from system to system, never truly knowing who he was, only that they believed in the person he was becoming. They escaped as the forge tore itself apart. The last glimpse Revan had of it was from orbit, a dark shape unraveling into starlight. It didn't explode. It came undone, like a memory finally released. The Republic celebrated. They had survived. Malak was gone. The Sith Armada was shattered. But peace didn't feel like triumph. It felt fragile, temporary, because the wounds Revan had opened in the galaxy and in himself didn't heal with victory. They lingered, whispers on untouched worlds, ghosts in Jedi halls. He didn't return to the Council, didn't seek praise, didn't ask for forgiveness, because redemption, if it ever came, wouldn't come from others. It would come from what he did next. He stayed quiet, watched, listened. The Force no longer screamed at him. It murmured, and in those murmurs, he heard what lay beyond the edge of the known galaxy. A whisper, a shadow, a darkness that made the Mandalorians look like children with sticks. He had tried to prepare the galaxy once by conquering it. Now he would do it differently. Not with fire, not with control, but with purpose. He would go alone. Not as a Jedi, not as a Sith, as Revan. The name no longer belonged to the mask. It belonged to the man, and the man still had work to do. The war was over, but the story wasn't, because in the quiet that followed the fire, something ancient had awakened, and it was watching. He didn't leave with fanfare. There was no farewell ceremony, no Jedi audience, no final command from the Republic. Revan simply disappeared. The Star Forge had been destroyed. Malak was gone. The war had ended. But peace didn't stay with him. It never had. He knew something was still out there. Not because he had evidence, but because the Force refused to rest. At night, in sleep, if it could still be called that, he felt it. A pull, a whisper, not a voice, a pressure. It came from the stars beyond the known maps, from the regions that had no names, from the places the Jedi refused to look. And he remembered he had been there once before the mask, before the war, before the Council erased him and tried to replace the man with a mission. During the Mandalorian Wars, Revan had chased the enemy into the Outer Rim. But what he found there wasn't the end of the Mandalorians. It was the beginning of something else, something old, something watching, something that had waited for Jedi before, and would wait again. He never told the Council what he saw, not because he wished to deceive them, because he knew they wouldn't believe it, or worse, they would, and do nothing. That silence had nearly doomed the galaxy once. He wouldn't let it happen again. So he left, alone. Only Bastila knew. She had seen it in his eyes in the final days. The distance, the way he looked at the stars like they weren't far enough. She asked him not to go. He said he had to, because something was coming, and the galaxy wasn't ready. It had never been ready. He took no armies, no maps, only a single ship, and the memory of what had once pulled him into the dark. The unknown regions were not truly empty. They were full of old paths no one remembered. Revan followed the echo of his own past. He remembered fragments, visions, a shadow world, a throne without a voice, and the feeling that someone had once owned him. He wasn't hunting an enemy. He was hunting himself. And every system he crossed, every dead beacon, every lost ship drifting in silence, all of it felt like breadcrumbs scattered across time. Then, one day, the signal changed. Not static, not distortion. A voice, not in words, in feeling. Cold, endless, patient. He followed it, not because he trusted it, but because he remembered it. It wasn't the voice of temptation. It was the voice of truth, the kind that doesn't care whether you're ready to hear it, the kind that tells you the war hasn't ended, only paused. He crossed the edge of the last known star chart, and still the voice pulled him forward. He reached systems with no names, no suns, no time, places the Force recoiled from, and then Dromund Kaas, a planet that should not have existed. Storm-wrapped, shrouded, hidden for centuries from all but those who served the shadow. There, Revan felt it fully. Not a whisper, a presence, not dark, not light. Just emptiness. It didn't approach, didn't demand. It simply waited, because it had been waiting. For Revan, for years, maybe longer. He landed, and the storm swallowed his ship. There were no guards, no prison, no need. The moment his feet touched the soil of Dromund Kaas, his journey was over, because the Emperor had already found him, long before Revan knew he was coming. He never saw the Emperor at first. No throne, no face, No crown of power to define him. Just a presence, vast, suffocating, eternal. It filled the air like gravity. It reached through the ground, through the walls, through him. Revan had faced Sith Lords before. He had stared into the eyes of Mandalore. He had fought Malak, his own reflection, and lived. But this was different. This was not a man wielding the dark side. This was the dark side wearing the shape of a man. The Emperor of the true Sith Empire, Vitiate. A name whispered across millennia. A being so ancient that his existence had become myth. And now, the myth had found its author. Revan tried to speak, but words died before reaching air. The Emperor didn't communicate through language. He simply was. His thoughts pressed against Revan's mind like a tide, each wave heavier than the last. He wasn't trying to break him. He was trying to know him. The Sith had studied Revan from afar, his wars, his victories, his fall. They knew of his mask, his power, his rise and ruin. But the Emperor wanted more. He wanted the reason. Why Revan had turned. Why he had fought. Why he had returned to the light. Because to the Emperor, those questions were keys. And Revan was the lock. The chamber around them pulsed faintly with the hum of the dark side. Statues lined the walls, silent, twisted reflections of ancient Sith Lords who had knelt before him. The Emperor stepped closer, or perhaps only the feeling of him did. "You are the echo of a failure," the voice said, though his lips never moved. "You sought to master destiny. You became its servant." Revan steadied himself. He had felt fear before. This was not fear. This was erasure. He tried to resist, to build walls in his mind the same way he had resisted the Jedi Council's tampering years before. But the Emperor's power wasn't brute force. It was patience, like water against stone. Slow, inevitable. Every thought Revan tried to hide, every emotion he buried, the Emperor found. And he learned. He saw the Mandalorian Wars. He saw the betrayal at Malachor. He saw Bastila, the Jedi Council, the moment of mercy aboard the Forge. He saw it all. And through it, he understood Revan in ways Revan never had. He saw the truth that Revan had spent his life avoiding, that every act of rebellion had come from fear not of death but of loss. Revan had sought control to protect what he couldn't bear to lose. The Jedi, the Republic, the galaxy. But fear, once fed only, demanded more. And now, that fear stood naked before its creator. The Emperor spoke again. "Your purpose was never yours to choose." Revan met his gaze, or what passed for eyes in the shadow. "Then whose was it?" The Emperor smiled without expression. "Mine." And in that instant, Revan realized what had happened long ago. When he and Malak first ventured into the unknown regions during the Mandalorian Wars, it wasn't fate that had led them to the Sith. It was design. The Emperor had called them, guided them, broken them. Their fall had not been an accident of pride or defiance. It had been a summons, and they had answered it. He had thought he defied destiny, but he had served it. Revan felt the cold pierce deeper. The Emperor's hand, or something like it, touched his temple. "Now," the voice said, "you will serve again." And the world went dark. His body fell, but his mind didn't follow. Because the Emperor didn't kill him, he consumed him. Revan's consciousness was pulled inward, stretched, scattered, reshaped. Half of him resisted, half surrendered. The light fought, the darkness learned. And between them, a cage formed. He wasn't dead, he wasn't alive. He was kept. A prisoner not of chains but of the Force itself. There are prisons made of stone. And then, there are prisons made of thought. Revan's was the latter. He didn't wake. He didn't sleep. He simply was. suspended in a darkness so deep that even the Force struggled to move. Not empty but crowded, filled with echoes of every life the Emperor had taken. They whispered through him. Some screamed, some begged, all forgotten, and through it all, the Emperor listened. For centuries, Revan's body was kept alive, sustained by machinery and power drawn directly from the dark side. His mind, however, was torn apart, fractured into obedience and rebellion. One part of him served, one part of him resisted, and between them lay an endless stalemate. At first, he tried to count the days, then the years. But time didn't move here. It was erased, stretched into a single, unending moment. He learned the meaning of eternity and the price of memory. Because the Emperor didn't want Revan dead, he wanted him useful. He pulled knowledge from him, strategy, insight, the instincts of a leader who had fought both Jedi and Sith. He drained his mind of everything except the core of will that refused to break. Sometimes, Revan would feel himself standing again, walking beside soldiers, speaking in battles he didn't remember. The Emperor had used his image, his influence, his legend. Across centuries, the name Revan would appear whispered in temples, feared in Republic archives, worshipped by cults who never knew he was still alive. The galaxy moved on, wars came and went, empires rose and fell, and still, he remained. In the beginning, he fought the intrusion, tried to anchor himself to who he had been. But memory faded like smoke. He could no longer see Bastila's face, only her presence. Could no longer recall Malak's laughter, only the sound of betrayal. Could no longer remember his own voice without hearing the Emperor's whisper inside it. And so he adapted. Because he always did. He built walls within walls. When the Emperor tried to reach his thoughts, Revan gave him fragments, false memories, partial truths, ideas wrapped in contradiction. He fed his captor confusion. The Emperor learned from him, but Revan learned him. He saw how the Emperor's hunger worked, how it devoured galaxies not for conquest but for permanence. The Emperor wasn't chasing power, he was running from death. And that made him afraid. Revan used that fear like a blade. He would speak into the silence, not aloud, not in defiance, just enough to echo. "You are not immortal," he would whisper, "only delayed." Sometimes the darkness recoiled, sometimes it pressed harder. But Revan had found his advantage. The Emperor could cage his body, he could fracture his mind, but he couldn't erase the Force's memory of him. Because every will, every soul, every act leaves a trace. And the Force remembered. It remembered the boy who defied the Jedi, the general who saved the Republic, the conqueror who built an empire to stop another, the man who stood against his own creation. It remembered Revan, and through that memory, something in him endured. A single thread of light, buried under centuries of shadow. It didn't fight. It didn't scream. It simply waited. The Emperor called it defiance, but it wasn't. It was hope, faint, quiet, impossible, but alive. And after 300 years, when the galaxy had forgotten the man entirely, that thread began to stir again. Because Revan wasn't gone. He was remembering. Most ghosts fade. This one grew louder. Long after the Jedi stopped searching. Long after the Republic stopped caring. Long after his name became a legend whispered by Sith cults and forgotten in Jedi temples, Revan remained. Not in body, not even fully in mind, but in will, a presence within the Force that refused to vanish. The Emperor believed he had won. 300 years of stasis, silence, and submission. But something had shifted. The moment Revan stopped resisting, he began to listen. Not to the Emperor, to the Force. He began to feel the ripples again. War stirring in the galaxy. The return of the Sith to known space, the stirring of a republic that had once tried to erase him. And with that, the thread he had hidden inside himself, the last true part of him, tightened. Not like a rope, like a root, anchoring him, pulling him back. He was still trapped, still suspended within a decaying prison of dark energy. But now he reached, and the Force responded. He began to speak, not through voice, through feeling. Visions began to surface in places of power. Temples long sealed began to stir. Old holocrons flickered to life. Jedi Masters meditating in silence heard a name they hadn't thought of in lifetimes. Sith Lords in forgotten tombs felt watched, haunted. Something ancient was waking. The Emperor felt it too. He doubled the efforts to suppress it, poured more power into the bindings, deepened the fractures, clouded every layer of Revan's mind. But the harder he pressed, the clearer Revan became. Because he had learned one truth: pain doesn't destroy identity, it reveals it. And Revan's identity was not built on victory, it was built on loss. Loss survived. He had been broken before. He had rebuilt. He would do it again. But this time, not for conquest, not even for redemption, for freedom. He knew now what the Emperor was. Not a ruler, not a Sith, but a wound in the Force, a hunger without end. And wounds, no matter how deep, can be closed. So Revan waited for the moment when anyone would feel his presence, would follow the echo, because he could not free himself. But he could call, and the call had been sent, to ancient bloodlines, to Force sensitives, dreaming of things they had never seen, to the hidden, the lost, the willing. He had no army, no fleet, no title, only a voice. But sometimes, a voice is enough. Because the Force doesn't forget. And what it remembers, it protects. Revan's will stretched beyond his body, beyond his prison, beyond the centuries. He became a shadow in the Emperor's mind. Small, quiet, unbreakable. Not strong enough to overthrow, but strong enough to slow. And in those delays, planets were spared. Secrets remained hidden. Lives endured. A fracture had formed in the dark, and the Emperor could not seal it. He didn't know why. But Revan did. Because the Emperor had consumed thousands, millions, but only one ever resisted from within. And that resistance would become the spark, the beginning of the end. The lightning never stopped on Dromund Kaas. For thousands of years, it rained, but not with water. It fell with judgment, with silence, and with the weight of a will that no longer knew the limits of life or time. When Revan vanished beyond the known galaxy, many believed the worst was over. The Jedi clung to the illusion of balance. The Republic scrambled to restore its foundation. But in the darkness between stars, something older than the Mandalorians, older even than the Sith triumvirate, stirred again. He had waited for this moment. The Sith Emperor, not a name, but a title. And even that was given, not earned. The being behind it had already forgotten who he used to be. The boy who once walked Nathema no longer existed. In his place stood something far more terrifying. A hollow thing wrapped in ancient flesh. A hunger that had swallowed its own past. The first act of that Emperor was extinction. Nathema was erased, stripped of the Force, its people, its memories. In return, the Emperor gained something unnatural, something that pulled light from the galaxy like breath from lungs. The Force bent around him. Jedi could not sense him. Sith could not control him. He did not need allies, only obedience. And so, deep in the unknown regions, far from the Republic's reach, the Emperor built his empire. The first stone was fear. He found survivors from the Sith's old bloodlines, remnants from Naga Sadow's fallen kingdom, exiles from Korriban, zealots who worshipped power more than truth. He promised them a future, not of survival, but of vengeance, of order, of a galaxy returned to its rightful ruler. And they believed him. The journey to Dromund Kaas was long and violent. Entire ships were lost in hyperspace. Worlds without names became tombs. But those who arrived saw something extraordinary. A world heavy with the dark side. A sky scarred by storms that never faded. And a silence that pressed against the skin. It became the throne world of the new Sith Empire. But this was not the Sith Empire of old. There were no rival lords plotting in open chambers. No hidden apprentices waiting to strike. There was no rule of two. No brotherhood of darkness. Those were fractures, flaws in the Sith's evolution. The Emperor would allow none of it. He was the center, the beginning and the end. His voice was never heard in public. His face never shown. His presence was enough. Those who looked upon him too long either fell into madness or worship. Some said he could peer into a man's thoughts before the words left his lips. Others claimed he had no body at all, only a will that wore robes and flesh like a mask. The Sith who followed him wore armor, not names. Their titles were stripped. Rank meant nothing. Only service mattered. Those who questioned disappeared. Those who obeyed rose. It was not power that defined them. It was submission. This was the first time in Sith history that fear was directed inward, not toward rivals, but toward their own master. The Emperor created the Dark Council, but not to share rule, only to delegate it. 12 seats, each representing a pillar of Sith control, war, secrets, dominion, and more. But even the Council bowed to the one above them. Their decisions could be undone with a glance. Their lives ended with a whisper. Still, the Empire grew. Cities rose from the jungle floor. Kaas City became a citadel of black stone and steel. Temples were carved into the cliffs. The Imperial Guard was born red-robed warriors who felt no pain, no doubt, only loyalty. Children were taken young, trained not just to fight, but to believe, to kneel. They did not worship the Force. They worshipped its absence, the quiet that followed when the Force was consumed. And through it all, the Emperor remained still. He did not need to act. His will rippled outward through servants and visions, through shadows that did not belong to anyone. Some said he could be in 100 minds at once. Others believed he had already merged with the dark side itself, no longer a Sith, but something beyond definition. A god, perhaps, or a wound in the Force that never healed. The Republic, meanwhile, slept. They had no idea an empire had risen beyond the rim. Their eyes were turned inward, their faith wrapped around peace treaties and Jedi reforms. The Jedi Council believed the dark side had been pushed back once again. The wars were over. The Sith were extinct. Even as tremors echoed through the Force, they dismissed them as echoes of old scars. But there were some who remembered. Revan had spoken of a threat beyond the stars. Before his disappearance, he warned that something was coming. But few listened, fewer believed. And so the silence held. Back on Dromund Kaas, the Emperor prepared. Not for conquest, not yet. For patience. He studied the failures of Exar Kun, of Revan, of Malak. He dissected the mistakes that had exposed them: pride, haste, rebellion. He would allow none of it. His empire would be perfect, invisible, slow, and when the time came, the galaxy would fall, not because it was weak, but because it never saw the blade until it had already been struck. Even his own Sith did not know his full plan. They were weapons, not partners. Their victories meant nothing if they forgot their place. And if they did, they were replaced. No name was too important, no power too sacred. Only the goal mattered, only the future, one of silence, one of rule. The emperor did not care for planets or politics. He did not dream of banners or parades. He desired one thing: total control of the Force itself. And to do that, the galaxy had to be broken. Not conquered, not ruled. Erased, piece by piece. And so he waited. And the lightning continued to fall. There was no passion in his vision. No anger. No chaos. Only structure. The Emperor's rule was not built on fury. It was built on obedience. He did not scream like the Sith Lords of old. He did not duel in the open or crush rivals for glory. He had no rivals, only tools. Some knew they were being used. Most did not. On Dromund Kaas, control was not earned. It was assigned. Sith were trained, ranked, and deployed like soldiers in a machine. Their emotions were not their strength. Their restraint was. Rage was permitted, but only when ordered. Ambition was allowed, but only in secret. Power could grow, but only under his shadow. The Empire had become a reflection of its master. Each citizen was given a place, every action, a cost. Even architecture spoke of order. Buildings stretched tall but never too tall. Windows were small. Streets were silent. Nothing was wasted. Beauty had no value. Efficiency was worshipped. And under that perfection, fear flowed like blood. Even the Jedi did not instill fear like this. Because the Emperor was not a man. He was a system, a design, one that did not forget, one that did not forgive. Children were separated from their families as early as age 5, tested for Force sensitivity. If found strong, they were taken to Korriban. If weak, they became workers, soldiers, engineers. If rebellious, they vanished. There was no room for questions in this empire. The Sith Academy on Korriban reopened under the new regime. But it was no longer a place for chaos or infighting. It became a crucible, a place where individuality was broken and reforged into purpose. Acolytes were no longer allowed to kill freely. They advanced through discipline, not treachery. Those who failed the trials were recycled, repurposed for lesser service, or eliminated. In this way, even death served the Empire. The Dark Council, though seemingly powerful, remained under constant scrutiny. Their ranks rotated often. Lords who grew too bold were removed, sometimes quietly, sometimes as a warning. No counselor could move troops without imperial approval. No policy was passed unless the Emperor allowed it. Even their thoughts were not their own. It was said that when the Emperor dreamed, the council felt it. That when he meditated, they wept without knowing why. Some believed he had linked their minds to his through ancient Sith rituals. Others whispered that they were no longer fully themselves, that pieces of their spirit had been consumed in exchange for power. None dared speak of it aloud. The Emperor's true doctrine was not expansion. It was preparation. He saw the galaxy not as a map, but as a puzzle, one that had to be solved before it could be destroyed. Each sector, each system, each people had a role. Spies were planted across the outer rim. Trade routes were observed in silence. Even Jedi outposts were tracked through agents who didn't know who they truly served. The Empire did not act. It absorbed. One by one, ancient artifacts were collected. Sith holocrons, Jedi texts, Rakatan remnants. Not for worship, for study, for understanding. The Emperor was not interested in history. He was interested in patterns, mistakes, weaknesses. He believed knowledge could make him eternal, and perhaps it had. For centuries he did not age, did not change, did not speak. He simply existed, an eye that never closed, a shadow that never moved. And around him, the galaxy spun unaware, until one day, a ripple appeared. Small at first, a name spoken in secret. a presence reawakening in the Force. Revan. The Emperor felt it before anyone else. A whisper across the void. A voice that should have been silent. He had long since forgotten the Jedi turned Sith. His imprisonment had been absolute. His mind crushed, his body forgotten. Yet somehow, Revan's will had endured. The Emperor said nothing, but he adjusted his plans. A second Dark Council was assembled. This one secret, this one loyal only to the hidden war. Their task, to eliminate threats before they became known. Their methods, silence, misdirection, sabotage. Revan had been a threat once. He would not become one again. Across the galaxy, small shifts occurred. Mercenaries vanished. Holocrons were moved. Jedi artifacts were relocated without explanation. All aimed at hiding the past, erasing the path that could lead others to truth. Because the Emperor's greatest fear was not death. It was exposure. If the Republic learned what was coming, if the Jedi began to remember, his plans could unravel. Centuries of control could shatter in a moment. Not because of rebellion, but because of belief. Hope was more dangerous than any weapon. And so hope had to be suffocated before it could breathe. He ordered the creation of sleeper agents within Republic ranks. Operatives with no memory of their true nature. Planted years in advance, ready to awaken when needed. Some were soldiers, others senators, even Jedi. The war had already begun. The galaxy just didn't know it. This was the doctrine of the Sith Emperor. To conquer through silence, to invade without armies, to infect belief itself. And all the while, lightning still danced across the skies of Dromund Kaas. The people did not look up anymore. They had learned that the light was not for them. They only waited for the next command. And in the silence that followed, a single name stirred again in the darkness. Not a prophecy, not a hero, just a man who had once defied the void, Revan. But the Emperor was not concerned, because he had already planned for this moment. He always had. The galaxy still slept. The Republic believed the war was long over. Jedi Knights resumed their patrols across the Mid-Rim. Senators debated mining rights and taxation routes. Even the Outer Rim began to see fragile peace return. Trade resumed, borders stabilized. But under that silence, something was shifting. It began with whispers, strange activity in uncharted systems. Pirate bands disappearing without conflict. Trade vessels rerouted around unknown anomalies. Entire colonies reporting strange dreams, only to fall silent weeks later. The Jedi sensed it, but they could not name it. The Force grew quiet, not in peace, but in warning. And far beyond their reach, in the depths of the unknown regions, the real storm was building. The Sith Emperor had not waited idly. For centuries he had watched, studied, adapted, and now his design neared completion. The Sith Empire was no longer just a secret. It was an army, rebuilt in steel and doctrine, fueled by discipline, not emotion, forged for one purpose: to erase the galaxy that had once rejected them. Fleet production on Zeost had doubled. Warships, silent and sleek, left the dry docks each cycle. Crews were trained from birth, loyalty chips implanted, names replaced by numbers. Even officers obeyed without question, not out of fear, but because fear had been replaced with something stronger: purpose. Planets like Bostherda, Tool, and Dromund Fells were turned into vaults of forgotten power. Artifacts unearthed, rituals refined. Sith alchemy, once chaotic and grotesque, became science. The dark side was no longer just a force. It was a formula, one that could be replicated, taught, weaponized. The Council still met beneath the Emperor's gaze, their voices hollow, their hands tied. They no longer ruled. They were conduits. They passed down his vision like scripture, each one afraid to blink too long in case they missed something or were erased. But even now, a problem remained. The galaxy was not ready, not for war, not yet. And the Emperor, in his cold patience, refused to strike too early. Victory was not enough. It had to be total, final, permanent. He needed more than ships. He needed doubt. So he began to weaken the Republic from within. Senators were corrupted in secret, promises whispered through dreams, influence offered without cost. Entire guilds rose and fell under his command without even knowing who they served. Corruption was no longer a symptom. It was a tool. The Jedi, already stretched thin, found themselves reacting to crises they couldn't understand. Pirate uprisings, black market wars, Sith cults rising on distant moons. None of it seemed connected, but it was. Every piece part of a pattern, every echo a rehearsal for something louder. Meanwhile, the Jedi Council debated philosophies. They felt the shift, but they couldn't see the source. And when they looked into the Force, they found something worse than fear. They found silence. Revan, the man who had once glimpsed the Emperor's design, was gone, trapped in a void beyond time. The Jedi who might have understood what was coming, forgotten or ignored. Bastila Shan had retreated from public life. Karth Onasi remained loyal to the Republic but held no power over its fate. And the younger generation, born after the war, knew only stories, heroes, legends, nothing more. The Emperor was erasing the memory of Revan before the galaxy even realized it. He did not fear the man. He feared what the man represented. Choice, the ability to turn, to see beyond the lie, to break free. And so he buried him deeper. The Empire continued to grow, feeding on the edge systems, capturing planets with no name, populations that would never be missed. Slaves were taken, children trained, resources harvested without record. These were the quiet conquests, the invisible victories, and with each one, the storm drew closer. 1,000 ships waited behind blackened stars, 1,000 warriors trained in darkness, and above them all, a throne that had never been empty. The Emperor no longer spoke. He no longer moved. He simply waited, eyes closed, hands still, mind reaching through time itself. Some believed he was dead, that the throne was ceremonial, that the Empire ran itself now like a perfect machine. But others knew the truth. He was still there, watching, dreaming, becoming. And in those dreams, he saw fire. Coruscant in ruins, the Jedi Temple, torn open to the stars. Senators begging for peace that would never come. The Sith walking freely through the core, not as conquerors, as judges. And in that vision, he smiled. Because to him, this was not war. It was correction. The Republic had been a mistake. The Jedi, a flaw. The Force itself unbalanced. He would fix it all, even if it took eternity. And across the stars, in places untouched by light, his agents moved. Silent, precise, unstoppable. The galaxy thought it was safe, but the clouds had already gathered, and soon the storm would break. It began without warning. No declaration, no signal, no grand fleet assembling in orbit. Just a scream in the Force, sharp, sudden, undeniable. The sky broke first. Above Korriban, above Sluisvan, above Balmorra and Corellia, and a dozen other worlds that had once seemed safe. Not warships, not yet, but something worse. Silence vanished. The dark side moved. The Sith Empire, the one forgotten by time, had returned. Not with sabers drawn, but with shadows cast across light. The first strike came at the edge, small, surgical, A Republic listening post in the Outer Rim, lost without trace. Then another. Then 5. Entire patrol fleets vanished mid-transmission. No distress signals, no survivors, just static, just space. And then, everything changed. The fleet arrived. 1,000 ships. Not scattered, not desperate, not improvised, but coordinated, timed and merciless. The Republic wasn't ready. They had rebuilt for peace. Repaired the surface, but not the structure. Their military command was thin, their intelligence fractured, their unity an illusion. The Sith struck all at once. Fondor's shipyards fell within hours. Bifera's battlefields were set ablaze. Kuat barely escaped destruction, and Coruscant trembled. The Jedi scrambled to respond. But the Council was divided. Some believed it was a rogue faction. Others suspected internal unrest. Only a few recognized the truth. The war had begun, and the enemy was not new. They had simply waited. A generation had passed since Revan's fall. Many Jedi had never seen real war. They had studied peace, taught balance. But this enemy didn't speak, didn't negotiate. It advanced, and with it came something worse than armies. Understanding. The Sith weren't wild. They weren't divided. They weren't ruled by ambition or chaos. They were ordered, trained, believing. They didn't just want to destroy the Republic. They wanted to reshape the galaxy. Not in rage, in cold vision. At the center of that storm was a presence none could name, but all could feel. A will behind every movement, a mind behind every silence. Like a wound in the Force, ancient, still bleeding. The Sith Emperor did not speak to his enemies, but his message was clear. We have returned, and we remember. Entire sectors were lost in weeks. The Outer Rim bent under the weight of invasion. Planets surrendered before the first shot. Others resisted, only to vanish in orbital fire. The Jedi sent knights. Most didn't return. The Sith weren't just warriors. They were hunters. Each one trained in the old ways. Each one loyal beyond death. They didn't claim worlds with politics. They claimed them with fear. Bastila Shan, now a Jedi Master, warned the Council. But they hesitated. The trauma of Malak's war lingered. They still remembered the cost of choosing sides too soon. And so they waited. Again, and the Sith advanced. Again. It was on Ord Radama that the truth became undeniable. A full Jedi task force was deployed. 3 Masters, 12 Knights, Republic command at their side. They made planetfall under full defense, and vanished in a day. When reinforcements arrived, they found the city still standing, but the people were gone. No bodies, no battle, just silence. And a symbol carved into the stone, deep and precise. The sigil of the Sith Empire, burned into the bedrock. After that, the Republic called it what it was: war. They tried to rally, called upon allies, reformed fleets, recalled veterans. But the enemy was already inside the con walls. Senators turned traitor. Trade routes collapsed. The HoloNet flooded with misinformation. Even the Jedi Temple was breached not by force, but by shadow. A young Padawan turned on his master in the meditation chamber. No warning, no sound, just a saber through the heart, and a whisper, spoken in a voice that wasn't his. He is coming. It wasn't madness, it was message. The Emperor didn't just send ships, he sent ideas, doubt, division. And slowly, the Republic began to crumble from within. On the front lines, the Sith pushed toward the core, and behind them, they left no statues, no monuments, only silence. Every battle brought the same rhythm: shock, collapse, assimilation. They didn't leave survivors. They left stories, enough to make the next planet fear before the fight began. And above it all, the Emperor watched, his will spread like a tide, not screaming, not raging, just unfolding. Perfect, cold, complete. And somewhere, deep within that storm, a name stirred again. Revan, still bound, still hidden, but not forgotten. He had once warned them, once stood against this same darkness, and now, his voice echoed faintly in the memories of those who still lived. In the end, it wasn't the size of the fleet that broke the Republic. It was the silence before it. The years they spent ignoring the storm, pretending peace was real, believing the shadows had passed. By the time they looked up, the sky was already gone, and war had returned. Not as a mistake, not as revenge, but as destiny. The day the sky broke was not a tragedy. It was a reckoning, and the true war had only just begun. There was no peace after the war, only stillness. And in that stillness, something ancient waited. The Jedi Civil War had left the galaxy in pieces. Cities still burned beneath skies that no longer remembered stars. Millions were dead. Whole systems had turned to ash. Yet what lingered wasn't only destruction, it was uncertainty. A kind of echo in the Force. Heavy, incomplete, like a storm that had passed, but left its pressure behind. And at the heart of that storm was a silence. A silence shaped like a name no one dared to speak. Revan. The Republic tried to rebuild. Senators argued. Trade routes reopened. New navies were built from the skeletons of broken fleets. But no one could replace what was lost. Not really. The scars were too deep. The Jedi were worse. The High Council was crippled. The Order, once 10,000 strong, was down to a few hundred. Scattered, mistrusted, blamed. Not just by the Republic, but by themselves. Because it wasn't just Revan who had fallen. Dozens of Jedi had followed him to war. Hundreds more had vanished during the Mandalorian Crusades. And when the war ended, those who came back, didn't return whole. Some had turned to the dark side, others had simply vanished. But one returned not with rage or power, but with nothing. Her name was Meetra Surik. The galaxy would come to know her as the Jedi Exile. She had fought under Revan, served in his campaigns, followed him into bloodshed and flame, from Cathar to Malachor. She had been trusted, even feared. And when the Jedi Council summoned her to answer for it, she didn't resist. She came, and they exiled her. Not for crimes, not for failure, but for the way she came back. Because something was missing from her. The Force, or so they thought. She had become a wound in it, a blank place where sound should be. A fracture, a scar. The Jedi didn't understand it, and so they cast her out. And Meetra said nothing. She left the temple, left the Order, left the core, and vanished. Years passed, and during those years, the galaxy forgot her. But something else did not. In the unknown regions, the true Sith stirred. Not the false lords who had risen and fallen before, but the ones Revan had discovered. The ones who had turned him. The ones who had ruled in secret for over 1,000 years. They were not shadows anymore. The Sith triumvirate had risen from the wreckage of Malachor. Darth Trier, Darth Nihilus, Darth Sion. Each was broken, each was powerful, and each hunted Jedi. They didn't strike with fleets or banners. They didn't challenge the Republic openly. They moved like ghosts, in the dark. And Jedi kept dying, one by one. Quietly, entire enclaves were wiped out. Dantooine, Cathar. Some never even had time to send a distress call. And yet the Republic noticed nothing. The Jedi Order thought it was coincidence. Bad luck. Survivors were rare. Those who lived couldn't explain what had happened. Some claimed it wasn't death they felt, but erasure. Like entire lives had been erased from the Force. The High Council could no longer lead. It had become hollow, paralyzed by fear. And in their silence, another silence returned. Mitra Surik. No one called her, no one summoned her, but she felt it. A whisper, a weight, a tremor. She didn't understand why. She had shut herself off from the Force, buried it deep inside. But the wound inside her had never healed. And now, it pulled at her. She began to dream again. Of the war, of the voices she tried to forget, of names she couldn't say. Revan, Malak, Kriya. The echoes would not stop. And so she returned, not to seek redemption, not to reclaim anything, but to find out why the galaxy still felt broken. The ship she took was old, scarred from battles long past. Its droid pilot was older still, and like her, it carried secrets. She didn't go to Coruscant. She didn't speak to the Jedi. She went to the Outer Rim, to the edges of memory, to places that once burned, to find what had been forgotten. The first stop was Perigus, a mining colony, silent, ruined. She arrived to find death, no survivors, just wreckage and gas. And then, another voice. Kriya, an old woman, blind, bound by the Force, waiting for her, not by accident, not by fate. She had known Mitra would come, and she knew why. What followed was not trust, but necessity. They left the dead moon behind, and the journey began. One system after another. Dantooine, Nar Shaddaa, Onderon. Each place held pieces of a larger truth. Jedi were hiding or being hunted. And always, there was silence. Not the silence of peace, but the kind that follows screams too loud to remember. Mitra had changed. She was not like other Jedi. She didn't speak like them, didn't act like them, because something inside her had stayed broken. And that was why she could survive. Kriya saw it, others feared it. But in a galaxy where Jedi were dying without a trace, she was the only one who could walk into darkness and not disappear. Because she was already part of it, not through evil, but through emptiness. The Force didn't flow through her. It fractured around her. She didn't bend it. She resisted it. And that made her dangerous. To the Sith. And to the Jedi. And so, the wound that had once led to exile now became the only hope of finding the truth. But the truth was not a single thing. It was scattered. And finding it meant reliving every ghost she tried to leave behind. They called her a wound in the Force. But before she became that, she was just another name on a battlefield no one wanted to remember. Mitra Surik stood among the ashes of Malachor V. Her hands still trembled, even though the war was over. The silence around her wasn't peace. It was what remained after something sacred had been broken. The Jedi said she had turned away. The Republic said she had disappeared. But neither saw the truth. She had obeyed Revan. She had believed in him, trusted him, even loved him, in ways she could never speak of. And when he ordered the activation of the mass shadow generator, she didn't question it. The explosion didn't just tear apart planets. It tore her soul in half. Something inside her died when the gravity collapsed Malachor into dust. The screams of the fallen didn't fade. They echoed, not just in her memory, but in the very Force itself. They clung to her like shadows, and when she returned to the Jedi Council, they felt it too. She was exiled, not because she was dangerous, but because her pain was too loud, too raw, too unresolved. The Jedi didn't know how to fix what she had become, so they chose not to look at it. And for a time, Mitra wandered the galaxy in silence. She carried no lightsaber. She spoke to no one of what she'd seen. The Force, once her companion, had vanished from her. Cut off not by will, but by trauma. She didn't leave the Force. The Force recoiled from her. But the galaxy kept turning. The Mandalorian Wars became old news. Revan's betrayal was now history. The Sith triumvirate rose and fell in the shadows, and Mitra, forgotten by most, drifted from world to world like a ghost. No one knew where she went, not even she did. And yet, the wound remained. Some say she still heard things, felt things, faint and buried. Not like the Force used to be warm, deep, ever-present, but as a distant heartbeat beneath the surface. A whisper of what was lost. It wasn't until the Jedi began dying again that her silence cracked. One by one, those who had survived the Jedi Civil War were hunted. Names from the past, masters who had once stood in judgment of her. Now gone, killed not in open battle, but hunted like prey. The Jedi Temple remained eerily quiet. The Order had no voice left, and so the galaxy, once again, turned to forgotten people. Mitra returned, not as a warrior, but as something else. A seeker, a survivor, a soul who had nothing left to lose. Her path began not with a mission, but with an echo. Paragus II, a mining facility in the Outer Rim, was silent when she awoke. Alone, disoriented, and stripped of purpose. But there, she met an old woman who spoke in riddles. A woman cloaked in darkness, whose eyes had seen too much. Her name was Kreia. Kreia was more than she seemed. A former Jedi, a former Sith, and perhaps something else altogether. She didn't offer comfort. She didn't offer truth. What she offered was permission to question everything. To walk a path no one understood. To reclaim the Force not as a gift, but as a burden. Together, they left Paragus and escaped a republic hunting its own ghosts. Kreia guided her not toward vengeance, but clarity. Each step of their journey was a step backward into history, into trauma, into memory. They sought the last surviving Jedi Masters, not to fight them, but to ask why. Why did they abandon the galaxy? Why did they silence those who tried to help? Why did they cast her out when she was only trying to save lives? One by one, she found them. Vrook on Dantooine, still bitter. Kavar on Onderon, still conflicted. Zez-Kai-El on Nar Shaddaa, still regretful. Each encounter was not a reunion, but a reckoning. The Jedi had failed not just her, but themselves. Their silence during the Mandalorian Wars had been their greatest mistake. Their refusal to face Revan's shadow had only fed it. And now, they saw what Mitra had become, a wound still bleeding, but alive. Some begged her to return. Others warned her to walk away. But none could answer the question that haunted her most. Where had Revan gone? Kreia whispered theories. That Revan had sensed a deeper threat. That his fall to the dark side had been a sacrifice, not a betrayal. That his war had been a delay, a desperate attempt to hold back something worse. The true Sith, a name not spoken in centuries. A people not seen, only feared. Revan had vanished into the unknown regions seeking them, and he had never returned. Mitra could no longer ignore it. She had followed him into war. Now she would follow him into the dark. But to do that, she had to become whole again. And that meant accepting what she was. Not a Jedi, not a Sith. Something else. A thread between past and future. A bridge between silence and memory. The Force did not return to her in a flash of light. It returned like a slow breath, a tremor in her spine, a warmth in her hands. Pain was still there, but so was purpose. She rebuilt her saber, not to fight, to remember. She no longer sought approval. She no longer needed redemption. She only needed to know the truth. And so she walked forward, alone, but no longer empty. Every world she stepped on remembered war. But now, they also remembered her. A face not of power, but of empathy. Her allies were not soldiers, they were broken people, like her. A former assassin, a fallen Mandalorian, a child of war. Each of them had been scarred by Revan's choices. Each of them still followed. Because even when she didn't hear the Force, they heard something in her. Not greatness, not prophecy, but hope. And as they moved deeper into shadow, the questions grew louder. Was Revan still alive? Had he become the very thing he once fought? Or had he been right all along? Mitra didn't know, but she was ready to find out. No matter what waited beyond the stars, no matter what it cost, she had already lost everything. But if she could find Revan, maybe the galaxy didn't have to. The stars grew quieter the farther she went, not in sound, but in memory. Out here, the Force didn't sing. It whispered, like the ruins of a forgotten prayer. The unknown regions had no maps, only scars. No one traveled this far without losing something. And Mitra Surik had already lost nearly everything. But she had one direction, a trail of echoes not carved into star charts, but buried in stories, in ruins, in the minds of those Revan had touched. She followed him through memory. Nathema was the first place that didn't want to be found. A dead world, lifeless, voiceless, not destroyed by weapons, but by hunger. It wasn't just the people that had vanished. It was the Force itself, stripped away by a ritual too large for words, a wound in reality. She walked its surface alone. No birds, no wind, not even fear, just cold emptiness that pressed into her bones. It felt like looking at a corpse that still remembered being alive. This was where Revan had come, and this was where something had broken him. Nathema had once been home to the Sith Emperor, the real one, the one no one in the Republic even knew existed. He had a name once, Tenebrae, born to power, trained in silence, consumed by ambition. But what he became was beyond names, beyond Sith. He had killed an entire world to make himself immortal. Revan had discovered this, too late. From Nathema, the path grew darker, fewer voices, fewer clues. But Revan had left something behind, not messages, not signals, but impressions. He had tried to fight the Emperor, tried to stop him, but the Sith were prepared. The Emperor was not alone. Revan had been captured, imprisoned, and erased. Mitra learned this not from records, but from someone who had been there, a soldier, one of Revan's last loyal followers. His name was Scourge. He was Sith, a pure-blood assassin, but something in him had broken too. He didn't lie, he didn't beg, he simply spoke. He told Mitra that Revan had survived the confrontation with the Emperor, but not as a free man. He had been locked away, bound in a chamber deep beneath Dromund Kaas, kept alive by force of will, fed not on food or water, but on memory. The Emperor had used Revan, drained him, pulled knowledge from his mind, slowly, over centuries. But even after all that time, Revan hadn't fully broken. He resisted, not with strength, with presence. He whispered into the minds of others, subtly, softly, turning doubts into cracks, turning loyalty into hesitation. He planted seeds that would one day bloom into rebellion. Scourge had felt it, and he had betrayed the Emperor for it, but not to save Revan. To prepare for what was coming, they needed time. They needed the Emperor to believe he had won. And so they made a plan. Scourge, Revan, and Mitra. 3 paths, once divided, now briefly joined. They would strike from within. The Emperor's trust was thin, his visions vast. But even he could not see every shadow. They would use that. They would wait. and then destroy him before he could destroy everything. But fate, as always, has other plans. The strike failed, not because of strength, because of choice. Scourge betrayed them. He turned on Mitra, killed her, not from hate, from belief. He claimed the Emperor had shown him the future, that Mitra's path ended in death no matter what, that Revan would be stronger without her, that the galaxy needed something more than heroes. It needed survivors. Mitra's last breath wasn't anger, it was acceptance. Her presence faded, but not fully. Her spirit remained, bound not in pain but in purpose. She would linger at Revan's side, unseen, unheard, but present. And for 300 years, they endured. Revan in his cell, never fully asleep, never fully conscious. His mind split, one side resisting the Emperor, the other slowly falling under his control, and Mitra, still beside him, shielding what she could, a ghost who refused to leave. Their bond, once forged in war, now became a thread of resistance, a whisper against an endless storm. Others came and went. Revan faded from memory. The galaxy moved on. But deep beneath Dromund Kaas, something remained. The war had not ended. It had only paused. And in that pause, the Emperor grew stronger. His reach extended through centuries, through Sith, through assassins, through empires. But so did Revan's echo, a distant hum in the Force, a pulse that would not die. Mitra's sacrifice had not been in vain. It was her death that kept Revan alive. It was her memory that kept him whole, even as his face aged, even as his thoughts blurred, even as his light dimmed. Somewhere buried deep, the Jedi he once was still breathed. And so the trail of ashes didn't end with her. It ended with a question. If Revan could still remember who he was, could he still save what mattered? The galaxy didn't know, but it was about to find out. Because the silence was ending, and the Force was listening again. He was not there when she arrived. Dromund Kaas was a storm, a place that refused to die. Lightning split the sky every few seconds, but the rain never fell. The darkness was thick enough to touch, and in that darkness, Mitra Surik stood alone, feeling the weight of hundreds of lives she had lost. This was not a battlefield. It was a memory. Long before she came, Revan had stood here, bound in silence, tortured not through pain, but through the stripping away of will. His mind had been pried open again and again, not to extract knowledge, but to rewrite it. She felt the echo, not in the Force, but in herself. And then she heard him, not in words, not in speech, just the presence of someone who once held back galaxies with a single idea. The same man who taught her to win wars with silence and carry guilt like armor. Revan was alive. She moved deeper into the fortress, each hallway more ancient than the last. The Sith Emperor had built nothing. He had only stolen. Layer upon layer of old empires crumbled beneath his own. Dromund Kaas wasn't home, it was a graveyard wearing a crown. She didn't belong here, and yet this was the end of her story. Not as a warrior, not even as a Jedi, but as someone who had followed the Dark Lord into madness and still returned. She found Revan suspended in a prison of thought, not sleep, not death. His eyes opened before his lips moved. He looked at her like she was a familiar dream, one he had tried to forget, but couldn't. "You came." His voice was cracked, like glass in wind. But it was still his. She didn't ask how long he had been held. The answer lived in his face, in the way he stood, not on his feet, but on memories. He had been speaking to the Emperor, not in defiance, in battle. A battle of wills that never paused, never rested. Decades of silence, where the Force bent in opposite directions. And still, Revan had endured. But now, He was fading. The Jedi Exile had not come to save him. She had come to join him, not in defeat, in cause. Together, they would destroy the thing Revan had warned them about long ago. The true Sith. Not an empire, not even a race. A wound in the galaxy, a hunger that never ended. They didn't conquer for power, they conquered to erase. Revan had tried to stop them, failed. She had tried to forget him, failed. Now, they would try one last time, together. But the galaxy was not silent anymore. The Sith Empire had returned. Not as a rumor, as a storm. Armadars stirred beyond the deep core. Shadow operatives whispered in the Senate. And across the outer rim, ancient weapons blinked to life after thousands of years. Everything Revan had tried to prevent was happening, and he knew it. "You have to go," he said. She didn't speak. He stepped forward. Not strong, not broken, just real. "I can't hold him forever," Revan said. "But if I let go now, he wins. And I won't let that happen." Tears didn't fall. They didn't need to. He had always carried more weight than he should. She had always followed him too far. But maybe that was the only reason the Republic had survived this long. She reached forward and placed her hand on his. Not to pull him out, not to beg him back. Just to remember, this was the man who turned against the Council, who became the Dark Lord of the Sith, who shattered galaxies. And then, who chose to return, not to be forgiven, but to make sure no one else had to fall like he did. This was not about Revan. It was about what survived of him. A voice in the dark, a warning no one wanted to hear, a legacy no one wanted to claim. He turned from her, back toward the shadows. "You'll find others," he said. "You'll have to." She nodded, then left him behind. And in that storm, she became something new. Not Jedi, not Sith, not exile. Just the last hope of a war no one could see yet. She returned to known space with silence in her heart, but purpose in her steps. The galaxy was not ready, but she would make them ready. She found allies in strange places, old soldiers, half-trained Jedi, mercenaries with regrets, droids with souls, ghosts of a war long buried, and slowly, painfully, she stitched together what had been torn apart, each piece still broken, but held in place by one thing: faith. Not in the Republic, not in the Jedi, in Revan, because even in his absence, he still led them. Across forgotten worlds, they retraced his steps, from Malachor to Korriban, from Dantooine to Nathema. Each world told a different part of the same story. Revan was not a man anymore. He was a fracture in time, and through that fracture, something watched. The Emperor felt him, even now. A flicker of resistance that refused to die, and that flicker was enough to change everything. The war had not started yet, but it had already begun, and, at its heart, was a silence louder than any scream. Mitra knew she wouldn't live to see the end, but that didn't matter. Some people plant trees they'll never sit under. Some people burn so others can see, and some just hold the line until the galaxy is ready to wake up. She never spoke of Revan again, but every time she looked at the stars, she remembered the storm. The one that never rained, the one that never stopped, the one that still waits, beyond the edge of the galaxy. They thought he died on a nameless world, but Revan didn't die. He fractured. In body, in memory, in spirit, he became something less than life and more than death. The Force could no longer forget him, and the galaxy could no longer escape him. Long after his body had vanished from known space, something of him remained. Not a ghost, not quite. It was a wound, a break in the current of the Force, where pain leaked through. Some Jedi felt it like a whisper at the edge of meditation. Others described it as a silence where the Force should have spoken. But none of them understood what it truly was. It was Revan, not the man who once wore a mask, not the war hero, not the Sith Lord, and not the savior. What remained was the echo of all of them merged, lost, unresolved. He had once brought a war to the galaxy to save it. And now the galaxy felt that war still. In the quiet spaces between stars, in the unknown regions where even maps refused to go, the Sith Emperor still held Revan in chains. Not physically, not anymore. His body had long since outlasted its natural years. But the mind still burned. The Emperor did not destroy Revan because he couldn't. Something in Revan resisted. At first, it was willpower. Then it was purpose. Then, it became memory. Scattered images of past battles, broken friendships, and two faces that haunted every silence. Malak's voice in the dark, Bastila's light in the distance. He couldn't remember who he was, but he remembered that he had mattered, that he had once meant something to someone. The Sith tried to rewrite that, over and over. Years passed without time. Sleep bled into pain. Consciousness faded in and out of nightmare. But even in the deepest moments of isolation, Revan's thoughts would return to the same thing: regret. He had once believed the Jedi were blind. Then he had believed the Sith were corrupt. He had tried to save the galaxy from both, and failed. Now, somewhere far from the Republic he once swore to protect, and the Dark Empire he once ruled in shadow, Revan drifted in a half-existence of torment. The Sith used machines to keep his mind active, interrogated by silence, attacked by memory. He no longer screamed. The pain had become normal, but so had the focus. He wasn't broken anymore. He was becoming something else, something slower, calmer, detached. And yet, something inside him still waited, like a blade that had not yet struck. The Force was still with him, though dulled. Its current passed around him like water around stone. He could feel life across vast distances. He could feel war returning. He had seen it before anyone else. The true Sith Empire, the eternal Sith, the ones who hid while others bled, the ones who manipulated Exar Kun, who whispered to Mandalore, who used him and Malak as pawns in a larger game. They were still out there, and no one in the galaxy knew. Revan had tried to stop them once and paid the price. The Jedi thought they had saved him, but in truth, they had only delayed something worse. Now the Sith Emperor prepared again, gathering fleets, feeding on life, waiting for the Republic to fall into weakness. And Revan, still imprisoned in darkness, could do nothing but feel it. But there was one thing the Sith could never take from him: hope. A faint one, fragile, but it flickered. He had left traces, plans, fail-safes. He had sent visions into the Force shadows of his will. He couldn't speak directly, but the Force could carry hints, feelings, warnings. Maybe someone would hear. Maybe someone would come. The galaxy didn't remember Revan anymore, but the Force did. And that memory, though wounded, refused to fade. He began to center himself. For the first time in years, he reached not outward but inward, past the fragments, past the pain, past even the names he used to carry. He was not Jedi, he was not Sith, he was the wound. And the wound was watching. Centuries would pass before Revan's prison would crack, and when it did, he would not return the same. But the beginning of that change started here in silence, in patience, in reflection. The Sith thought they had buried a weapon, but what they buried was a witness, a presence that remembered both light and dark, and had loved and lost in both. Revan had once followed destiny, Then he tried to lead it. Now, in the shadows beyond charted space, he simply listened. The next war was coming, and he would be ready. There is a moment when a person becomes two, not in body, but in truth. Revan's truth had split long ago, the day he was broken by the Sith Emperor and reprogrammed by the Jedi. Two selves, one that remembered the light, and one that never stopped dreaming of the dark. When his body finally failed in captivity, those halves did not die together. They separated. One side dissolved into the current of the Force, the memory of the man who had loved Bastila, who sought redemption, who chose to protect life even after being cast out by it. The other remained cold, unyielding, shaped by purpose and forged through suffering. That part did not trust the light anymore. It trusted only the mission. The galaxy called it his spirit. But it was something stranger. It was as if the Force itself couldn't decide what he had been, hero or tyrant, savior or destroyer, so it kept both. The Jedi felt peace when they meditated on his name. The Sith felt strength, and neither realized they were reaching toward the same echo, the same broken presence lingering just beyond time. When the Emperor tried to consume Revan fully, he failed for a reason he never understood. The half he devoured was not the whole. The light Revan had buried deep inside had escaped him, carried through the Force like a ripple in calm water. It spread slowly, unseen, touching distant minds that would never know why they dreamed of him. In the Republic, there were pilots and soldiers who fought as if guided by an unseen will. Jedi Masters who awoke from meditation in tears, hearing a voice that whispered, "Do what must be done." Even Sith Lords who looked upon their empires and felt shame they could not explain. Revan's presence had become instinct, the Force remembering him even when people could not. But the darker half remained, still bound to the Emperor, still fighting. The two halves of Revan's being began to drift further apart like binary stars orbiting a memory. The light half longed for peace. The dark half longed for completion. Neither could rest while the other existed. Centuries passed. Empires fell. Names were forgotten. But deep within Dromund Kaas, something stirred. The Emperor's long reign was fracturing. His own followers whispered of rebellion. His shadow had grown too large, his silence too heavy. And beneath that silence, the dark half of Revan still burned. He no longer remembered Bastila, no longer remembered love, but he remembered purpose. He had become will without self, and that will was vengeance. The Emperor had tried to use Revan as a vessel of power. Instead, he had created a rival that refused to fade. It began subtly. Corrupted Sith officers hesitated in carrying out the Emperor's decrees. Acolytes began to question orders. Visions of rebellion appeared in their dreams, visions whispered by a voice they did not recognize. It was Revan, moving through the dark half of his own echo, turning the Emperor's empire against itself. When the dark half gained enough strength to act, it manifested not in body, but as will-given form. He gathered followers, Sith who believed balance could be achieved through domination, Jedi who believed peace required control. Together, they became a secret sect, the Revanites. They worshipped his mask as if it were scripture. They studied both light and dark, blending them into a philosophy that defied both orders. They claimed Revan would one day return to lead them to victory, not over the Sith or the Jedi, but over the Force itself. They were wrong, but not entirely. The Revan they prayed to was not the man who had once loved or regretted. It was his shadow, his ambition without empathy. And that shadow wanted to finish what the man could not. While the galaxy slept, the Revanite movement spread like infection. Its agents infiltrated the highest ranks of the Sith Empire and the Republic alike. They were patient, quiet, certain that their god still lived somewhere between both worlds. They were right. The two halves of Revan light and dark began to sense each other again. The light side, still luminous and fading, reached out from the netherworld of the Force. The dark side, still chained to hate, reached back. They did not speak. They collided. It was not war. It was reunion. In that collision, the galaxy shuddered. The Emperor himself felt it. A moment where something long forgotten awoke beneath his empire. A storm without sound. A consciousness older than his rule, equal to his hunger. Revan lived again. Not reborn, but reassembled. Neither half could destroy the other. So they merged. Light bled into dark. Dark bled into light. And what emerged was not balance, it was conflict contained. He remembered everything. Every death, every betrayal, every choice. He was whole again, but wholeness came with torment. He was the Jedi who had disobeyed. He was the Sith who had repented. He was the wound that still hadn't healed. For a brief moment, clarity returned. Revan understood the Force as few ever had. Not as sides, not as good or evil, but as consequence. He realized no one ever truly dies in the Force. They only change shape. And sometimes, what remains is pain. He had become that pain. An eternal reminder of what happens when belief replaces understanding. The galaxy would never see him again as a man, but it would feel him. In every war started by righteousness. In every peace broken by fear. In every choice that began with hope and ended in fire. The divided soul of Revan had finally become what destiny demanded. A lesson written into the Force itself. He wandered through ruins older than the Republic, worlds where the Force had gone quiet, where life had once bloomed but now only shadows remained. These places had no names anymore, and maybe that was fitting, because neither did he. Revan had become something less than a man, and something far more dangerous. He was no longer Jedi, no longer Sith, no longer alive in any way the galaxy understood. He was memory. He was will. He was a scar not just on history, but on the Force itself. The war had ended, but its echo hadn't, and neither had he. The Republic tried to heal. The Jedi tried to rebuild. But there were places deep in the Outer Rim, on the edge of the unknown regions, where silence was louder than peace. Where old Sith temples still stood, where starships from another time still floated in orbit, where nightmares had been born and might be born again. And sometimes those who walked too close to those places heard him, not as a voice, not as a ghost, but as something heavier, something broken, a weight in the air, a pull in the Force, a memory of pain. Some called it a curse. Others called it a warning. The Jedi eventually called it something else. A wound. They didn't mean a scar on a person. They meant something deeper. Something spiritual. A place where the Force itself had been damaged. Torn open. And it bled. Not blood, but absence. These were places where the Force had gone quiet, not because life had ended, but because something had been taken. And Revan was one of them. He wasn't just a wound in the Force. He was the first one. Jedi Masters whispered it in temple halls. Sith Lords chased it like a secret. None of them fully understood it, but they felt it. Revan's fall, Revan's war, Revan's redemption, all of it had torn something open that had never closed. And it lingered. The Sith triumvirate would later draw power from that wound. Especially Darth Nihilus, who became addicted to the hunger that Revan's actions had awoken. But Revan himself had vanished. Not in battle, not in death. He had simply faded. His last act had not been conquest, not revenge, but silence. He had faced the Sith Emperor in the unknown regions, fought him, and lost. But even in defeat, Revan had not broken. Not completely. Half of him had been imprisoned. The other half had been freed. A fragment of his mind, the Jedi part, escaped. It returned to the galaxy, and it waited. Waited for the day he could be whole again. Centuries passed, and yet, Revan's name never disappeared. To some, he was a hero who had saved the galaxy. To others, a tyrant who nearly destroyed it. But the Force remembered him differently. Not as good or evil, not as Jedi or Sith, but as both. Revan had once said that strength without control was nothing, and control without understanding was worse. He had tried to understand both sides of the Force, and in doing so, he had become something the galaxy wasn't ready for. A being who didn't serve the light or the dark, but truth. And truth, in the Star Wars galaxy, had always been dangerous. There were whispers, long after Revan's time, that he had been reborn, that he had walked the galaxy again, in another form, another name. But maybe that's what the Force does. Maybe those who burn too brightly never vanish. They just return in other shapes. The Sith Empire would fall. The Jedi Order would crumble. The Republic would rise and fall again. But Revan's legacy was never about politics, or empires, or titles. It was about choice. He had chosen to defy the Council. He had chosen to wear the mask. He had chosen to remove it. And in every choice, he had broken something. A rule, a boundary, a part of himself. And that breaking was what made him eternal. Because the Force had never been simple. And neither was he. Revan's tomb was eventually found, on a world no Jedi dared speak of. But even then, his body was gone. Only his armor remained, still scorched, still silent, as if the man had never been there at all. But the wound stayed, not in the stone, not in the sky, but in the Force. He never died. He became the question the galaxy could never stop asking. Was he the villain or the savior? And maybe the answer didn't matter, because Revan himself had stopped asking. In the end, he had become what no Jedi or Sith could understand. Not light, not dark, just a shadow between the stars, a memory of pain, a name the Force itself could not forget. This was the story of Revan, the exile who returned, the hero who fell, the Sith who turned back, the wound that would never close. And somewhere, in the silence between stars, he still listens, waiting, watching, not to return, but to be remembered. The galaxy moved on, but the silence he left behind never did. In every generation that followed, there were those who felt something when they meditated too deeply, or passed through ancient worlds where light and dark had once clashed. A presence that wasn't a presence, an echo that wasn't sound. Some called it legend, some believed it was Revan, but the Force never gave a name to it, because the Force didn't forget. It carried memory, not in words, but in weight. A stillness, a wound, and wherever that weight lingered, the stars themselves seemed quieter. Long after the wars ended, when the Jedi and Sith had both fractured into myths, his story was told not through temples, but through questions. Why did he fall? Why did he return? Why did he vanish? And beneath all of those, something darker, something older. Did he ever truly come back? Or had part of him always stayed in the dark? The Force never answered, but it remembered. It remembered the boy who walked away from the Council, the mask he wore, and the things he did behind it. The scream of a world falling silent. The whisper of a Sith who still loved the Jedi he once was. All of it, and for those who listened closely, in the quiet between conflicts, it was still there. He had not been the first to fall, nor the last. But he had been different, because he didn't fall for power. He fell for belief. And when that belief broke, so did he. The galaxy tried to paint him as a villain, then as a hero, then as something in between. But Revan had already let go of those roles. He had seen the face of the Emperor. He had heard silence where the Force should have been. He had screamed into a darkness so deep it had no edges. And yet, he endured. Not because he was strong, but because he refused to disappear. Even as time moved forward and new wars began, his shadow remained behind. Not to lead, not to fight, just to remind the galaxy that nothing was simple, that the line between savior and destroyer was thinner than anyone wanted to admit. Mitra Surik felt it when she went searching for him. And when she died in the cold halls of the Sith Emperor's prison, she became part of that silence, too. She didn't die for a republic or for the Jedi. She died for a man who had once made a choice. And that choice had changed everything. Revan was freed in the end, not by swords, not by ships, but by letting go of what remained. The dark side no longer ruled him. The light no longer saved him. He had walked the full circle, and in the last breath of his story, he found peace. The Force took him back, not as a Jedi, not as a Sith, but as something older, something truer. A wound healed by memory, and yet, even healed, that memory stayed. In every broken world, in every silent temple, in every moment where someone stood at the edge of light and darkness, unsure, he was there, not as a guide, not as a warning, but as proof that even in a galaxy torn by war, a single will-be-end person's choice still mattered. Revan didn't end with death. He became what the Force had always hidden beneath its surface. Not order, not chaos, but balance. And that balance was never quiet. It hummed beneath everything, beneath the rise of the Empire, beneath the fall of the Jedi, beneath the cries of rebels and the silence of Sith, a heartbeat too old to name, but still pulsing, not to command, not to conquer, but to remind that no side ever held all the truth, that no mask ever showed the whole face, that no war ever truly ended, because the Force wasn't about peace or power, it was about choice, and Revan had made his, long ago, in the silence between stars, and the galaxy still remembers, even when it doesn't understand why.